We are good, Chair Yenner.
All right, thank you, Josh. Okay, so I would like to call the April 27th regular business meeting of Independent School District 622 to order. Welcome to all the Excel winners and presenters. I see a lot of familiar faces that I don't always see at board meetings. Sylvia, Tyler. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Livingston,
Second.
second by,
Martins.
was it Kramer? Okay, all in favor say aye. And Josh, are you doing the roll call?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. So we have an approved agenda. Thank you. The first item, or the next item on the agenda, there was a request that we as a board take a moment before today's business meeting to just recognize the extraordinarily difficult moment we're in. So in recognition of this, Steve Hunt is going to read a statement on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Chair Yenner, members of the board. This school year has brought many challenges, along with the COVID pandemic and increased socioeconomic hardships. We have also continued to face the ongoing wounds of systemic racism. As a community, we are experiencing trauma and uncertainty that many of us have not encountered in our lifetime. At Independent School District 622, our mission is to commit each day to develop and empower lifelong learners who thrive in diverse communities. We will always defer to our core values, the first of which is that strong communities are inclusive and value diversity. We are committed to elevating student voice while supporting our community as it navigates a path towards healing. District 622 will continue to stand together to interrupt systemic inequalities in our society. Later in the meeting tonight, we will officially adopt our new racial equity policy, number 430, that states the following: all students have an inherent right to an equitable, accessible, inclusive, and culturally responsive learning environment. As the School Board of Independent School District 622, we commit to this declaration. In the face of a pandemic, hardship, and unrest, we will uphold each student's right to receive an education where they are valued, uplifted, and respected.
Thank you, Steve. The next item on our agenda is the Achievement Awards. Before we move forward, does anyone want to make any comments about the board statement? Okay, if not, then...
Chair Yenner, I'll make a statement. As a superintendent of this district, I am incredibly proud to work for a school board that shares these values and makes this a point to stand up for in the face of adversity. I talk about this often when I speak in different environments about having a board that is so wholly dedicated to racial justice. And I'm very proud to be a part of this team. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Anything else? Otherwise, I will move forward the Achievement Awards, which is also Steve.
Thank you. Excellence in Community Education Leadership, our Excel Awards, are presented annually to individuals and groups for their outstanding contributions to the continuum of lifelong learning in District 622. The District 622 Community Education Advisory Council hosted a virtual celebration for this year's award recipients just before this meeting. Because our meeting tonight is in a virtual setting, the award certificates will be mailed to each of the recipients. Receiving the Community Educator Award is Yvonne Borgerding, nominated by Julie Peterson. Yvonne has been a preschool teacher at Oakdale Elementary for 7 years. In addition to being an amazing teacher, she makes the district-wide early learning programs better by leading the subject area committee and supporting, encouraging, and challenging her colleagues. Thank you, Yvonne. Receiving the
I'm holding up the
Thank
certificate
you.
as you need, Steve, as well.
Okay, great. Receiving the Community Educator Award this evening is Julie Peterson, nominated by Heather Sanders and Tracy Tessier. Julie is the instructional coach for early learning, has been with District 622 for 7 years. This year, Julie mentored teachers in Zoom and Seesaw and coordinated all of the distance learning packets for early learning. She's a strong collaborator who is committed to students, parents, and her colleagues. Thank you, Julie. Receiving the Community Partnership Award is Tyler Grass, nominated by Kelly Ide. Tyler played a significant role in the health and safety of the District 622 emergency child care site at Richardson Elementary in the spring of 2020. His calm, helpful presence and expertise in cleaning and disinfecting every surface was reassuring at a time when many were feeling uncertain and afraid. He has continued to be a valuable resource to Adventure Connection as procedures have changed throughout the school year. Thank you, Tyler.
Yay.
Thank you.
And
Just want to say thank you to Community Ed and Kelly Aid and Adventure Connection. Do what I can for everybody.
Thank you, Tyler.
And receiving the Community Education Senior Friend Award this evening are Dave and Linda Zick, nominated by Cheryl Geispers and Tim Dooley. COVID-19 caused the Gladstone Meals on Wheels operation to switch from delivering daily hot meals to weekly frozen meals for a growing number of clients. Dave and Linda stepped in to assist the Meals on Wheels specialists in packing frozen meals 2 days per week. Their service is invaluable to the Meals on Wheels program. Thank you for your heart of service, Dave and Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you all. You'll be getting these awards sent to you in the mail, and we're so grateful for your leadership.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to all of those award winners and all the folks who nominated them. Next on our agenda, we have the consent agenda. Or no, sorry, we have public comment. And Josh, do we have anyone for public comment?
Nothing this evening, Chair Yenner.
Okay. Then next we have the consent agenda. So let me read this. So the consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous official business of the school board. The entire agenda may be adopted by the board in one motion. The motion for adoption is not debatable and must receive a unanimous approval. By request of the individual board member, an item can be removed from the consent agenda and placed upon the regular agenda for consideration and action. So tonight in our agenda, we have 5A, minutes of March 23rd, 2021 business meeting, minutes of April 6th, 2021 special meeting, minutes of April 6th, 2021 work study session, routine personnel, change orders, bid awards, and disbursements. So I'll read the motion Before I do, are there any items that you'd like removed? If not, be it resolved by a school board of independent school districts number 622 that consent agenda items 5A through 5G be approved as written, and a copy of the agenda item is attached to the minutes. Can I get a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jarman,
Second,
second by
Martins.
Martins. Okay. Second by Martins. All in favor, say aye, and Josh is going to read the roll again.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, so the consent agenda is approved. Thank you. Next on our agenda is reports, and we have our student school board reps. And Evan, I know you're here, and you said that Manny was unable to make it.
Yeah, unfortunately, he wasn't able to get off work tonight. So I'm going to cover the best I can for what's going on at North. So I think most importantly, last week, both North and Tartan, as well as many, many other high schools in the metro area and outstate, staged walkouts to highlight the current events that have been happening, both with the Black Lives Matter movement to shine some light on that, as well as to bring awareness to the shooting of Dante Wright. During those walkouts, they had such things as spoken word performances, songs, trauma healing activities, and just general protests as well, which I think was incredibly successful. And I think it was something that was pretty awesome to see. I know I myself didn't go because I'm a distance learner and I'm just still kind of getting over that mental block of being in any sort of crowd, but it was incredibly amazing to see such participation from the entire state in those. So moving on with Tartan, I guess I don't want to toot our own horns, but I think the most important event that has happened at Tartan is that our knowledgeable team plays second in the state tournament. Beyond that, the spring musical Grease is opening this Friday at Tartan. Spring sports have been going off without hitches. There haven't really been any major outbreaks. So I do want to give a shout out to the contact tracing staff, both at North and Tartan, for keeping all the hybrid students and the athletes, people who participate in extracurricular activities safe. With that, the boys baseball team at Tartan is actually 5-3 right now, 5-1 in the Metro East, which puts them at number 1, which is quite a few spots above North. I think they're at 3-3 right now. So no, I digress. So it's awesome to see that at both high schools, things like activities and spring sports have been going on without a hitch. And it really does seem like we're kind of rounding the end of what's going on right now. Student morale has definitely been going up, both with the change in the seasons and because hybrid learning has been such a success so far. And everybody's getting excited for things like prom and graduation, as well as last day of school, last week of school events and celebrations.
So Evan,
Yes,
I think you're old enough to be vaccinated now.
I am.
Yeah. Are you looking around for an appointment?
I'm actually got my second shot on Friday.
Oh,
Once the
awesome.
16 and up opened up, we pounced on any opportunity to get my brother and I vaccinated. So I'm fully vaccinated now. I will be in about a week, and he's getting his second shot on the 30th.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. And what's the buzz at school relative to vaccination?
I'm not sure because it's kind of difficult for me to get
Sure.
a completely accurate gauge on that because I'm not in the building most of
Right.
the time.
Right.
But it seems like the majority of the students are excited to get vaccinated. Some already have. I don't really hear too many dissenters towards the vaccine. People have also been doing pretty good at following mask protocols and social distancing within school as well, which is good to
Great.
see.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Evan, I had a question for you. So you talked about the walkouts for the both high schools. Did you hear any student feedback at all on how they felt about it? How did they feel supported? Did they feel empowered by it?
From the most part, I heard that students felt pretty empowered and supported. I think it also helped to draw in some people who weren't really paying too much attention to the situation and what was going on. So I think that was nice as well. Students did generally feel supported by teachers and administration as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan, and I did want to congratulate you for the second place finish in the Knowledge Bowl
Thank you.
for state. So
Thank you.
congratulations. Any other questions for Evan?
Chair Yenner, I do think, because I'm gonna have to leave the meeting in a little bit here, but I did want to comment a little bit more on the walkouts last week. I just would encourage, because I see my current principal here and I see my former principal here, and I'm sure other principals and staff are watching the meeting right now. So I would encourage them to work towards making that kind of thing a fixation in our schools, whether or not it's a walkout every month or if it's just events that are held within the school or after school. I think things like that really help to bring a voice to students who feel marginalized, who feel like they aren't listened to, and it really helps to just spread good advocacy and good allyship of what's going on.
Thanks, Evan. I mean, I just love that you bring your student voice to our school board. So thank you.
I'm glad to do it. Thank you.
Just one complaint that you could represent North a little bit better next time, Evan.
Hey, I'm biased. I'm biased, man. It's all jokes. I'm incredibly proud of what North has been able to achieve this year as well. I have, obviously, Manny's a close friend, but I have other close friends at North, and we always give each other crap about, oh, you go to Tartan, Tartan this, Tartan that. But I am very happy of everything that North has been able to accomplish this year as well. It's nice to kind of see that, especially in the past couple months, that kind of inter-school rivalry has been buried, and the students from North and Tartan have kind of come together and worked together on a whole myriad of issues and ideas.
All right. Thanks again, Evan. Any other comments, questions? All right. If not, then next on the agenda is superintendent's check-in.
Thank you, directors of the board, Chair Yenner. I'm very pleased this evening to have our high school principals with us this evening, Principal Wolf and Principal Thompson, who are going to share with you a little glimpse into the many things that have gone on this year at our two high schools. I would say that this year has been an incredible, challenging year, but one of the most amazing things that's come out of it is the crazy partnership we've had between our two high schools, which has been really delightful to see blossom this year. So with that, I will turn it over to our principal presenters.
Mr. Wolf, I thought you were still at Maplewood. No one had told me that you got to North. Congratulations.
I don't know, Evan. I think you might have known about that one. But good to see you, and thanks for representing Maplewood. Take care. Good evening, everyone. Board Chair Yenner, directors of the board, Superintendent Christine Tucci Osorio. Thanks for having Principal Thompson and me here tonight. We are certainly looking forward to sharing and bragging about our schools and maybe give you a little insight on how things have gone in a number of different ways. I think just kind of splitting screen here. Ms. Thompson's going to click slides. Yeah, so just purpose tonight in terms of what we want to share with you, and certainly open to questions as we go through it. We want to share information about the supports we put in during the various learning models I'll do a quick recap of kind of what that's looked like this year. And we're talking about supports for both kids in distance learning and our in-person kids. Share a little bit about the expectations that we put on teachers throughout the year. I'll provide some, and Ty will provide some comparative data on last school year in 1920 to this year in 2021 in terms of trimester 1 and trimester 2, some grades and no credit data that we have. And then we'll share a little bit at the end about what we're doing moving forward to get kids back on track or making sure that we're supporting them as well as possible. Yeah, so we thought it'd be good to share the timeline of the school year and the supports are available during those. I don't know, we're on model number 5, I believe now, as we work through this year. So, and just one note that by design, the supports and models were very much aligned between the 2 high schools. And for that matter, oops, there's the screen just went. And for that matter, also, the middle schools were very aligned with us as well as we kind of work through the changes. So next slide. Yeah, so kicking off in, with the first distance learning model, lasted about 5 weeks until October 2nd. This is where, if you remember, almost all students were learning remotely. We had targeted in-person support for a number of different student groups, primarily our special ed kids in the center-based programs, our EL students, and then also we provided some supports in person for some of our struggling regular ed kids. And I think depending on the day and depending on the school across secondary, we had anywhere from 30 or 40 kids to 50 or 60 kids during this time. And in terms of supporting the kids at home, we had a number of these things in place and staff in place trying to get kids online on the front end, connecting with people, families, and just making that initial connection, getting kids, and then once they did make connection, getting kids engaged in the lessons. We did home delivery of materials and laptops. We did some materials pickup and laptop pickups at the school as well. And so in terms of the staff that provided these supports, we talked with case managers and paras and our Dreamline coaches, Check and Connect staff, counselors and admin as well, and at both schools. Next slide. So then we move into October. I don't know if it was October 5th, where we jump into hybrid model 1, where our students were in person 1 day a week, and we had cohort A, cohort B, and our distance learning. So we had 3 different groups of students, and this is where we expanded the targeted in-person support. So in many cases, we increased the number of days, 1, 2, 3, 4 days for some of these students, depending on their needs, depending on what their families wanted, depending on our capacity. Capacity was always a conversation as we worked through the year. And then in terms of what the teachers were expected or asked to do, they were given 3 options. And some of you know this, but they could post their lesson, a recorded lesson that they did during the day later on that same school day. They could preload lessons and do a flipped model where they're providing support in the classroom, or they could do what most teachers did, and that's teach concurrently the students in person and in distance learning at the same time. And for hybrid model 1 at both high schools, we had probably 80 to 85% of our teachers were teaching concurrently at both North and Tartan. So from there, from hybrid model 1, as you know, right around the beginning of December, in person, we jumped into distance learning version 2. In-person learning was shut down almost entirely across the state, and all kids are now in distance learning. And so we certainly continued with the same supports as best we could, but we had increased those supports based on what we were seeing and hearing or not seeing from the kids and the success they were having or not, or the struggles. And so we started adding at both schools more consistent teacher office hours. We offered content drop-in sessions where we'd have some people, support staff manning a Zoom room, and then kids would show up, and then they'd say, hey, I need help in Algebra 1 with an Algebra 1 teacher or Calc or whatever it was. And then we'd contact those teachers, and we'd have teachers and kids jump into breakout rooms and get that support. And then we also explored some mental health drop-ins with counselors or social workers at both the schools as well. So from distance learning version 2, we moved on to hybrid phase 2 in March, and this was right after spring break. This is where the students now are going 2 days a week. We hoped we would see a big uptick in terms of the percentage of students and families that had opted for hybrid. We didn't. This is probably one of the easier shifts of the year where our staff certainly knew how to do the hybrid thing. One of the big differences is now the comfort level in terms of the teachers Nearpod or Pear Deck or Zoom. So I think the quality of the experience for the kids went up. And then at this point, once we jumped into hybrid phase 2 at both North and Tartan, Ty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but about 95% of teachers were teaching concurrently. And I think at North, all but 5 or 6 teachers were teaching both kids in front of them and kids at home at the same time. And the teachers that didn't were for very good reasons, whether it was a FIED teacher or a teacher teaching wood shop or something like that. So it was really difficult to do both those things at the same time. And then of course, from phase 2, we jumped into what we're in now, what we think is the final phase where kids are attending classes, students are attending classes 4 days a week. This kicked off 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think I'll support what Evan said, that the energy and I think the morale has gone up. The engagement's gone up, including the need for behavior support's gone up. So we've jumped into that a little bit I think at both schools. We have added in this phase additional after school tutoring. We continue to get requests for kids to jump into hybrid and sometimes out of hybrid, back to distance learning. And now we're here on April 27th in the final phase. And so just jumping off our timeline here, just sharing a few pictures throughout the year. Here at Tartan, they're welcoming their students back into hybrid, and some pictures of what it looks like at Tartan in the classrooms and such. And then the same for North, where the staff welcome the kids back to hybrid. And then just a few more pictures to mark our wonderful year in COVID. And I think at this point, Ms. Thompson is going to jump into high school sports.
Thank you, Principal Wolf. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about high school support structures, and then Principal Wolf and I will go back and forth and share a little bit about the data and some of the things that we've learned throughout this process. So just to frame things up a little bit, and it was referenced just now by Principal Wolf in regard to our schedule. Before we talk about some of the supports we have, I wanted to explain a little bit around the rationale of how we got to these different phases and what we were offering to students and how we tried to make decisions about what we thought was best. So if we look just right now at trimester 3, where we wanted to have the most recent numbers for you, but this is pretty much the same numbers that we had the first time that we started with hybrid, even 1 time a week, is that you'll see at both North and Tartan, our numbers are actually exactly the same. They are off by only a couple of decimal points. We have at both of the schools, 43% of our students have opted to be hybrid. So they're coming to school. At first it was 1 day a week, then it was two days per week, and now 4 days per week. And then the remaining 57% of the student population at both of our schools has remained at home. And so this was a major factor when considering our schedule, as well as considering what we thought would be best for all student learners in regard to getting instruction. And so you'll see we have our schedule Monday through Thursdays where our students are coming in. Are you able to see my cursor? Okay, I'm just making sure, thank you. So in person, you can see in green, the hybrid students are coming Monday through Thursday. And then our distance learners, like Principal Wolf said, around 95% of all classes are happening synchronously. So the kids are logging in at the exact same time, whether they're a distance learner at home, zooming into the class, or they're in hybrid having the instruction with their teacher. And the teachers oftentimes have the screen behind them so that the students who are zooming in are able to see exactly what's happening and doing some different toggling back and forth. They have laptops and they have their desktops at once. So the majority have class all at the same time, both groups. And then they will go into breakout sessions where sometimes the hybrid students are just doing a small group just with the kids in person in the room. Other times, depending on what the work is, they might be interacting with one another. But our staff has done a really good job, I believe, of making sure that our students are as integrated as possible for as many opportunities and of their courses as possible so that they don't feel separate or different. For those classes like Woods or PE or maybe a FACS class with cooking where they are not able to live Zoom at the same time, the teachers are either choosing to have their direct instruction videos pre-recorded and posted by 8 a.m. on Mondays so kids at home have access to them when they're able to. Otherwise, they're recording the live session so that the kids are able to see exactly what their peers saw that were in person, and then the students have access to that uploaded immediately afterward. So in the afternoons then, so all of our students have the 65-minute class period, 3 periods per day. And then the afternoons, oops, I'm sorry, just jumped. In the afternoons, they have targeted instruction time. And so they have 2 hours where they spend 35 minutes returning to each of those classes to do very targeted work. The students who are in distance learning can choose, or if a teacher can select them, to request that they are in attendance for those support sessions. Otherwise, some of our science teachers are using those as an example. That's when they're doing their science lab. So the hands-on pieces that the kids from distance might need to do differently, that's happening in the afternoon for kids. It might be an art project, it might be speech practice or a project, but those interactive opportunities are happening in the afternoon for hybrid students. And then kind of the on-demand zooming in is happening for kids in distance. This was spoken about a little, but we wanted just to provide kind of a visual of what those different layers of support are. So we have the teacher level of how all kids are able to access live instruction and all kids are able to access support from their teacher every day. And that happens through the schedule. In addition, we have these layers of support, which we always had at both buildings, and North also has a version of this. I just was screenshotted Tartan since I would be speaking to it. But we have our layers of support of how we are supporting students. And we had to really, throughout this year, get better at defining who does what and how to best match students to their supports. So I won't read this word for word, but you're really able to see that we have our school counselors, and they're really working with students at a higher level of need. Our social workers also kind of fall under this, and we do have some mental health practitioners as well that work in our buildings to support students. And so they're working with the students at a higher level of need that have been identified either through team meetings or by teachers doing engagement referrals and reaching out to say they need some support. Or also sometimes parents will reach out. And so going through, there's a specific process for that. We also have student support coaches. So they're working with roughly 20 to 30 students quite regularly to reduce some of those barriers that they might experience to being successful. Student support coaches, actually, as well as all of our layers of support, are working with students that are some of whom are in person and some of whom are distance. So they've got some pretty specific schedules about when they meet with kids, either via Zoom or when kids drop down and work with them, or after school when they can support students that they're not being pulled out of class or missing any class time. Then we also have our Dreamline coaches who also work with students that could just benefit from some regular check-ins, some possible mentoring, maybe tutoring, but need less intensive support than some of the students that are working with other staff members. And then finally, we have our case managers. Case managers are teachers that, licensed teachers that work with students that have an IEP, unidentified needs. We also have, it's not an official case manager, but for some of our EL learners that are maybe level 1s and 2s, so they're just starting to really get secure in the English language and starting to learn. They also have specific EL teachers that are assigned to them to support them to make sure that they're able to continue to progress.
I have a question.
Sure.
About that last slide.
Yes.
So we have heard that there's an increased need for mental health services. Basically what's happening. Not only do we have the pandemic, but we also have several racial injustice things going on. Have you seen an increase in demand for these services, or not, or, I mean, where are we as far as demand is concerned? To be
Yes.
responsive for the needs.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, so we do have mental health practitioners that are contracted through the district and work within our building. So we have offices that the therapists use and share throughout the week. So there's different days when they come to work with different students. And so we have been trying to work really hard. Our social workers at both schools do a really good job of helping kind of be the bridge in identifying. So if a school counselor is working with the student, but potentially there's a higher level need, then they work through our social worker to get the student and family sometimes connected to that mental health practitioner. And then we provide the therapy services in the building if that's what the family wants, so that the barrier of transportation and access is removed. And so we've been fortunate actually that our school district has been able to increase the number of therapists that we've had that just happen to kind of coincide with when the pandemic was. And so at this point in time, we feel as if we've been able to meet the need. When there have been requests, we have been able to get students connected and be able to be signed up, because that does go through insurance. There's a process there that's a little bit different than if a student was working with a school counselor or student support coach.
I guess I'm also asking about the need. Maybe compared, not maybe 2020, because 2020 was also a difficult year. Maybe compared to 2019, are we getting more requests for mental health services right now as opposed to 2019?
I'll jump in there. I don't know that, I can't give you any data, but I would say just anecdotally, I would say the answer is going to be yes, if it isn't already. I think we're all operating as if the need is going to go up. I don't know what percentage or how significantly, but we're all, whether it's a teacher or support staff, I can say that I've had a significantly higher number of conversations with parents this year about mental health, more than I've ever had, in terms of the struggles at home, whether it's because of just the model or the distance learning, or when we canceled, when sports were shut down for a while. There's lots of contributing factors. There's certainly some, there's an impact on mental health in terms of what's going on in our community, both here locally and nationally. So I think a number of things are contributing, and we're hoping to start creating new relationships. I know I've talked recently with Tricia St. Michael's about relationships that we're looking at, maybe create a new relationship with an area college in terms of creating a pipeline into the high schools and middle schools with colleges in terms of getting interns in here on a regular basis. So don't have any hard data for you, but I think we're all anticipating an increase and exploring ways where we can expand that.
Thank you. I think the only piece I would add in addition to that, and I agree with all the things that were just shared by Principal Wolf, is that from my perspective and from the information that we have at Tartan, and we just haven't had a conversation about it, Principal Wolf and I, so I don't want to speak for him or his school. But at Tartan, as of right now, we have been able to meet the needs that have come forth and been presented. If a family's coming forth and have needed a request, there has been room at this time for a student to be able to get into a therapist. I would also add, though, is that we have an increased amount of supports because we didn't have Dreamline coaches before. We have 3, so we're talking about roughly 75 students that aren't getting support from a student support coach or a school counselor or maybe a therapist. And so we've added increased support. So I think we're meeting the demand right now, but I definitely agree that there are going to be some increases that we'll see as we begin to go into the next shift of returning to whatever normal school looks like in next school year.
I'd like to share a quick observation and then maybe ask a question too. I think that one of the challenges that the board may be anticipating as far as mental health crisis intervention is concerned is that our students not only are facing all of the challenges of new distance learning environments and the COVID concerns and all of that inside and outside of their academic structure. which is sort of where we were 3 or 4 years ago, was mental health issues and how it affected their schoolwork and their academic progress. But now we're in the additional challenges of everything that's happening socially and in our court system and in our racial justice conversations and in our social justice conversations and everything else that brings with it all new challenges for all of our students. And in a district that not only is as diverse as ours, but where we welcome the challenges of diversity and helping our students be successful in this environment, are we meeting those needs as well as we could be? I mean, it's academically, we sort of look at mental health issues from an academic and classroom point of view, but what about all these other challenges that are now coming forward, especially because not only are our young people better able to voice their concerns and their questions, but as a school board and in District 622, we profess to welcome those challenges of diversity. And are we becoming prepared to meet those challenges as well as we can?
I believe yes.
I want to add to what Steve just said. So Steve just said from the school board perspective, from a Black and mom perspective who has a son, a Black son, these last few months have been very challenging. They have been traumatizing. And I am hoping that our school system has resources to be able to help those students. And not only from, I just want to add that from also Asian American perspective too, that I actually don't have, but there's Asian head going on. And I know we have a lot of Asian American students in our school district. Do we have the resources to be able to help all those students that are going through the trauma right now? I just, a couple of days ago, I heard a statement, somebody saying that racism is a silent stalker. Can you imagine if you had a stalker every time? Everywhere you go, you're being watched and being afraid for yourself. And what kind of trauma does that bring to you? And I'm just wondering if we have the resources to be able to deal with the social situation that we have going on in Minnesota right now.
So that's a really big question. I'm thinking about multiple ways to respond, but I would say, first, as a Black female woman, mother myself of 3 sons, an individual, I do understand exactly what's happening, and it's traumatizing in my regular life, and it's traumatizing at work. And so I think part of the thing about our schools, and one thing I'll say about Tartan that I know is similar at North, even though we have slightly different systems, we're working to be really aligned. As you can see in this picture, we have multiple layers of support to be there for our students. And so, yes, we could use some more. We could use a few more student support coaches and Dreamline coaches, people to be there, guides on the side for kids every single day. But if we look back to some of these pictures, this is what our students see every day when they come to school. They see adults who are standing there ready to help them and support them. This is what the hallways look like every single day. And so, no, we're not perfect yet. Yes, we have work to be done. But I do think that as a school district and as 2 high schools, we are absolutely committed to being present physically present with our students as they walk through the building and as they go through this experience of not only the pandemic, but also the extreme stresses of the racial injustices and unrest that are happening in our nation. We're here together, doing it together. And I do believe that just the support that our students were able to receive during the walkouts at both buildings shows also that we're trying to figure it out together. We hear our students, we see our students, and we want to make sure that they understand that the school is theirs and we're creating space for them to learn and be as safe and supported as possible.
I would second all that Principal Thompson said, and I'd also say that one of the challenges moving forward and the things we talk about often is the communication piece in terms of, we can offer different supports and come up with different ideas and look for more resources and get more people. But I think one of the keys, and it's been an especially tough challenge this year, is really finding out what individuals and families and the students at large really need. And it's hard to figure that out. For example, certainly looking to support, as an example, we set up an Asian student support group via Zoom or offered in person, but probably 3-4 weeks ago. And while it's gotten some trickling students coming in, it's not reaching as many as we'd like. And so we're constantly talking about how do we find out what's the best mode or mechanism that we do to provide those supports. So it's a constant conversation. Is it standardizing our practice across all classrooms? Is it professional development for the adults? Is it communicating better with families? And I think it's a yes and to all those. But it is a continuous conversation. I know it is at North, and Ty and I talk, Principal Thompson and I talk enough where it's a constant conversation between the two of us, and we are also pushing the collaborative approach to our admin teams, collaborating our departments. I think that has been ramped up significantly in the last 8 months. I've been in this district for 8 years, and I think it's in 1 year at the high school level. So I think that's going well.
If I could just add to our principal's comments, one thing we've worked really hard on in recent years is really diversifying our leadership. And we're very proud that with regard to our administrators in schools, we're now at 50% leaders of color. So our high schools have Asian administrators, Black administrators, white administrators. They have a lot of diversity in leadership roles. And I think that makes a really big difference for how decisions are made, how planning is done, bringing those diverse perspectives to the table every time we face any unique challenge ahead of us. And I think one of the things that's been really wonderful to see is how connected our school leaders are to our students. And so when I talked about the student walkouts that were being planned, the students were talking, there's no surprises. They're talking to the leaders all the time because they know them so well and there's support networks there for them. Our Asian Student Alliance at Tartan, led by an assistant principal, V. Chai, has been an amazing group. And Tartan's group that's gotten started, Asian support groups, like those have emerged out of conversations with students and needs from students. And so both of our principals have worked hard to build very diverse teams. And that's been, I think, a really helpful piece of this, as have all of our schools, quite frankly. So we're proud of that.
Could I just bring up one thing? You're looking at Dreamline, the word Dreamline sounds like drumline or dance line or something, but Dreamline, that's an organization supported by the Santa Foundation, right? Where they bring in teacher of color, a lot of them, teacher candidates, right? To help the students. I just want to clarify. Ty, maybe you want to capitalize on how you managed to get the Santa Foundation to field these coaches for your school.
You might want to ask
Yes.
that.
I don't think I can take credit for it. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I got a delay.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, you might want to ask Principal Wolf as well, since he's best friends with Tony Senna.
Okay.
So fortunately, Tony and I go back to about 10 years old. So
wow.
We grew up playing sports together, and we've maintained a friendship. We were certainly involved in this conversation. I used to work in St. Paul. He's had partnerships in a number of districts, but it was a really solid collaborative conversation between admin at Tartan and Christine and her cabinet, and Tony came in, and made his pitch, and it was an easy sell and purchase in terms of what they have to offer. So, and we're continually tweaking how that looks in both of our high schools, and do we expand it at the high schools and other secondary schools and elementary schools. And so he is anxiously awaiting word from the legislature in terms of his funding, so that'll matter too.
And it's in the omnibus bill, so he has impressed both parties and the governor. So I'm impressed with your that we're have this relationship with him, and it's great for the district. These are excellent people to come in and work with our kids. I'm really super excited about that.
For sure.
Thank you. So I think I'll continue on if that's okay. I was just just to recap, talking about support structures. So what it looks like at the classroom level, what it looks like with our layers of support, and then what it looks like a little bit for communication with families. And so this has been something that just has been a struggle, being in distance. Typically, families are able to come in, they can come to the school. We invite them in for conferences. There are various events throughout the year. And that's just something that we have not been able to do for quite some time now. And so something that we at both of our schools were able to do throughout this year is really up our parent communication. And so it's quite detailed on the right in the table, and I don't expect you to read it all, but the gist of it is we've broken up our students into different groups. So with having, over 1,600 students at each school, it's hard to make sure when every single one of those 1,600 plus have 6 different classes, that the teachers are able to give a phone call to all 150 of their kids that they teach throughout the day. And so we have been able to break up our 9th grade teams and our 10th grade teams through bar structures where team teachers have roughly 25 kids. And you can see that they call, they've been able to connect for conferences, but just there's a very targeted calling plan, which you can see on the right. And I would be happy to bore any of you with later at a different time. But we've had targeted calling plans every single trimester to really make sure that parents are in the loop about what's going on with students and their progress. We've also had open Zooms during conference time. So there's just a directory of all the teachers' names. And the parents are able to then just click on the Zoom and log in during that time. And then they can just pop right in with the teacher. So they don't have to do a big process of making an appointment in a conference and trying to remember the time. They just go in at that open time and they're able to connect and get their needs met. We also, through this time, have begun updating grades weekly. Typically in the past, pre-COVID, teachers would update their grades about every 2 weeks. With COVID, we found that it's been really important in this time to be able to make sure that kids are getting that immediate feedback on how they're doing, and parents are able to track how their students are doing. And so grades are updated weekly on Fridays. And that's a system that kids are looking at, parents are looking at, everyone kind of knows that's what's going on, and they're able to track progress. And then we also offer, which I know was referenced before, some after school tutoring, but there is then an option for parents to be able to have an open time to check in, Zoom in, or have a phone call or an in-person check-in if that's what needs to happen. So we've just been trying to be more creative about access during a time when access for families has been more difficult than is typical. And so then I'm just going to start talking a little bit about some of the impact on student achievement. There's a lot of information we could have put in. And so we just put some general, more overarching pieces. I will talk about some general data and then hand it over to Principal Wolf to talk about North, and then I'll match that data with Tartan's. And then at the end, I'll share a couple of the key takeaways. And if there are questions about the data piece at that point, then I'm sure we can answer them before I hand it off to Principal Wolf to finish. So with all these different supports, how are students doing? This chart shows both North and Tartan students that are passing all 6 of their classes. So the success rate by percentages, and we did compare it by trimester. So you can see the light blue is last school year, the dark blue is this school year, trimester 1 and trimester 2. So trimester 1, the success rate for passing was 79% pre-pandemic, and 78 if you look here post-pandemic. And so you can kind of track how students are doing. You're able to see at both of our schools, the students are maintaining a pretty close percentage. They're off by only a couple of percentage points in regard to their success rate pre and post pandemic. And I'm sure that many of you have seen some of the news that has come out in other districts throughout the year about there being maybe 40% of students that are, failing multiple classes and things of that nature that are taking place. This data is showing that the majority of our students are actually having success. Obviously, there are some things that we're doing to support students that are struggling, but these are the success rates overall for kids.
All right, so Ms. Thompson just showed the success rates for North and Tartan. Here's a different visual that shows both tries, starting from roughly about on the left side of each chart, and this is North specific, starting from the third week in both try 1 on the left and try 2 on the right. And I guess the key thing I'd like to show you here is that notice the consistent drop in the no credits in all 4 grade levels. Each one of those colored lines represents one of the grade levels, with on the left side the blue one being 9th grade, and so on, green 12th grade. And we certainly, I think, can attribute the success in terms of the drops in the failure rate to all the things that we've talked about previously in this presentation. I will point out, I do want to point out the difference in the failure rate on try 2 is slightly higher for each grade, and I don't know what the exact answer is for that, but I think at least in part the explanation can be during trimester 2, that's when we had the shutdown, and a large chunk of that term was entirely at home for all of our kids, and with a couple transitions mixed in there. And so I think that plays into it. We're not quite sure. So I will move on to the next slide. And so this slide shows the, for North again, no credits for this year and last year, broken down by race. And so you see all the student groups here. The light blue is last school year, 1920, the dark blue being 2021. So you're looking at the percentage of students who are failing 1 or more classes. And so it's just a percentage, not a number count. If you take a look from the light blue to the dark blue, 3 of the 4 biggest student groups have showed improvement from last year, actually. With one large exception, our Asian students actually increased the percentage by 10%. And that is certainly something we are paying attention to and have noticed, and as we move forward and with what we do or don't do. And so, we have, I think at North, we're 26 or 27% Asian students. And yeah, so that's a concerning number for us, but 3 of the 4 did have significant drops from last year to this year. And I think now Ms. Thompson is going to show something similar for Tartan.
Yes. So this slide is similar to the one that was just shown by Principal Wolf about the number of students with a no credit grade for trimester 1 on the left and trimester 2 on the right. And again, it's broken down by grade level. We are tracking the students. We know the exact number. So I'm looking at a more detailed graph right now on my computer. If we just look at the purple and we're talking about, well, how many students, like what am I really looking at? This number right here represents, I'm sorry, let me just make sure that I'm tracking it correctly. Don't want to say it wrong. At the end of the trimester, for trimester 1, we're talking about 89 students, right here, sorry, 89 students. And then at the end of trimester 2, we're talking about a drop of 65 students. So these are these numbers are representing real student numbers, but when we're talking about 1,600 plus students, it's a small number of kids. Many of these students that have NC grades are identified and are working with one of those support layers that we shared at both of the high schools. And then also something interesting that you can see when you're looking at these big graphs of data is you can see when some parent communication happened. So right here is when some conference calls were taking place for kids. And then all of a sudden it looks like, oh, wait a second, grades started to get better. And so over time, you can pretty much identify when those contacts were happening with families, and then how students were able to make some changes. Oops, I'm sorry. We have been struggling a little bit, as you'll see, our 11th graders have a higher rate of having one no credit or not, which we've been working more targeted with them. They all, though, have a consistent drop where by the end of the trimester, for the most part, our students have been passing, which also attributes to that success rate that you saw in the beginning of roughly 79% of students are passing all of their classes. And then if we look at similar graphic again of our students with an NC broken down by race and percentage from 2019 light blue, and then our current year being 2020, you will notice that there are some small changes and increase. So similar to Principal Wolf, 11% of our students, Asian students, had one no credit grade last year, and now we're at 13% students. We also had a 2% increase with our African American students in their no credit grades. We had a drop. Our Latino students have shown fewer no credit grades, as have our white students, and our multiracial students have maintained the same. And so we're really diving into looking at what's going on with specific groups, but then also how are certain students doing? Because when we look at the numbers, we have, for our Asian students, for example, trimester 1, we had 38 students that had one no credit grade, and now we have 43. So we're trying to figure out how to best support those students. But again, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference when we're looking at percentages of like, how many kids are we talking about? Who are these kids? What are their names? And we do have specific meetings with those student support groups and team teachers to talk about that. So just a few of the key takeaways, and then I'll pause, that we've had is that overall our number of students with no credit I'm sorry, my computer's jumping around, with a no credit is down. So that means our students are remaining on track to graduate. Even during this pandemic, they are maintaining that level of moving towards graduation. And also students are coming to school. So they're showing up online, they're showing up in person, but they are attending class. And they are maintaining their grades for the most part relative to what they were pre-pandemic as far as percentages. Also BAR, which I know this presentation was not about, but we could talk about it later. It's a specific support so we have where we're teaming our teachers with an administrator, a school counselor, the student support layers that we talked about, and their teachers. That support is working. Our 9th grade failure rate is down significantly over the past 2 years. 9th graders are actually doing better this year than they have in years past. We're having weekly data meetings to talk about the students, and we also have systematic communication plan, which we also are attributing to some of the success of our kids. And then finally, our struggling learners are receiving in-person support have been having greater success. So although that may not sound like a surprise, the kids that are coming in that we are able to reach and connect with on a daily basis have been continuing to do better. And we've been working on our outreach this entire time to get more kids to come in that maybe aren't, that we believe would do better if they were with us.
You want to go to the last one?
Yes.
So thank you so much for providing the data. It was very helpful in having to understand how our students high school students are doing during this pandemic time. And I really appreciate the disaggregated data that shows the different racial and ethnic of our students. And so we've during this pandemic time, we've heard probably through the news that the pandemic has exacerbated the academic achievement gap, but it sounds like maybe our school district, that's not true for our school district, which is a good news. But my question is that for those that were on track for graduation, as far as high school graduation, the students that were on track for high school graduation before the pandemic, are they still on track for graduating? Because as we know that high school graduation is one of the most important things for a young adult, a young, 18-year-old or 17 or 19 to do. Are we tracking that data for the seniors?
Yeah, I know that Ms. Thompson could say the same exact thing that I am. We are tracking every single student extremely close in terms of where they're at, their exact credits, what they need, the full court press that we're putting on them right now. Counselors, grade level administrators are all meeting on a regular basis in terms of updating those spreadsheets and making sure that nothing or no student falls through the cracks in terms of making sure we are doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that they walk across the stage, which will be outside in the football stadium this year. And so the answer is yes, that is exactly what we have to be doing, and we're doing it closely. And I think I don't know the exact numbers and I can't give you data on that right now, but I think in terms of pre-pandemic to where we are now, I think we're in a pretty good place in terms of the percentage of kids that are on track. But I could follow up with that later. I know that that's right at the fingertips of our counselors and Ms. Fang, our assistant principal for seniors.
Agreed. And I would say just by looking at these success rates, you're able to see that if we talk about trimester 2 for both of our schools, the success rate is only off by 1 percentage point from pre-pandemic. So the kids are relatively doing the same if we think about the margin of error plus or minus 1 or 2% when you're looking at large pieces of data. They're right there as far as doing well. Obviously, different kids have different courses that they might need, things of that nature, but our students have been able to maintain passes in their classes, which they're continuing to progress towards graduation. And I'm sorry, Principal Wolf, I forgot about your last slide.
That's all right. Yeah, so just a little bit about getting kids back on track or continuing the supports, just some of the things we're thinking about and talking about and planning for right now. So don't know if you've heard about the Bridge program that's being run through Targeted Services, and for both Tartan and North, the incoming 9th graders, they have the opportunity to earn credits, high school credits, before they come into school in the fall. And we're identifying students who may need the most support or get them off to a good start and get them 1 or 2 or 3 credits in the summer. Both high schools are working to improve our grading practices and make them more equitable. We're also talking about standardizing those across the high schools. Down, I think, bullet second to last, talk about online programming. We are ramping up our online programming for next year in a significant way. And with that programming change and shift, North and Tartan will be sharing teachers on a major, a significant level, as well as students. And so you may have a teacher that's coming from North and is teaching AP Bio online and is teaching kids from both North and Tartan in an online format. And so we have to make sure we are aligned like we've never been before in terms of how we're structuring things and grading things. Also on here, we've mentioned just looking at how do we increase our mental health supports for our students and staff as well, and online programming. And of course, we've mentioned BAR. And so those are just some of the things that come to mind, and things that we're doing and talking about and thinking about as we move into summer and leave this this COVID year behind us.
Can I just ask a quick question? With that teaching alignment between the two high schools, will that help us with staffing in terms of better managing some of our licensing issues between classes and maybe decrease the reliance on substitute teaching during the school year? Or are we not quite that far yet?
Oh no, we are certainly in a place where the online programming, and I don't know if Josh is still here. He is. It's allowed us to be fill up some teacher positions from a 0.6 to a 0.8 or a 1.0. It's allowed us to offer classes when we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So, I mean, the short answer is yes. We're already noticing a difference. Both high schools have been able to buy up teachers this year because of it. Our flexibility has gone up. That continues. Josh and I just talked about a unique situation for a science teacher this year that we could buy up or add FTE to a position, so it becomes a more attractive position to hire because it's a vacancy right now. And so that has been a very positive trend this year.
One additional thing as you wrap up the presentation, I'd like to just share. You've heard us talk a little bit about credit recovery in the past and conversations about our goal to someday. Currently, we our ALC, our credit recovery program, is outsourced to 916, our intermediary district, and we've talked about really having a goal to bring that back in district again, because that way we don't have to send kids to another district, another program to get credit recovery. The other thing that's traditionally happened, and this is true in most districts, kids make up credits in the summer if they fail a class or don't pass. And already our principals right now, and they maybe didn't mention it as much, but we're already offering credit recovery now, so they don't have to wait till summer to get it. So kids who are behind in a credit can stay after school already and start making that credit up now and not wait until summer comes. So that's been a really amazing flexibility that everybody's trying to get more creative in supporting our learners, but having technology makes a big difference as well to be able to support our learners in many different kinds of ways too. So that's been a really exciting piece. And we are going to eventually be having conversations with you as a board about when we get things ready to go about potentially changing up our contract with 916. And they know that District 916 knows that we're considering looking at bringing our ALC students back in-house again. And we're getting ready to gear that, put that plan in place in the timeline for that. So that'll be a conversation we'll be having at the board level as well. But we really feel strongly that students who are making up credits need to be a part of us, part of our community, part of our activities, part of, all that happens in a high school situation, and not, we don't want to further other our students by having them have to go somewhere else for that makeup work.
If I could add, thank you so much, Superintendent Tucci Osorio. One piece that I failed to mention about the supports with the credit recovery piece, and I believe also it gets to our board members' question about the kids on track to graduate, and what Principal Wolf mentioned about the counselors knowing exactly where the kids are. So a new opportunity that we've had because of the pandemic is that ability to be able to support our kids who are in credit recovery better because of that afternoon targeted instruction time. So some of the students really struggle to get to credit recovery right now. They're having to do it completely on their own via Zoom. And those are students that often struggle in the first place just to get to credit recovery and do that extra work on top of all of their classes. And so what our counselors have been doing is actually identifying the students that are in the building with us, because as you recall, we don't have all of them, but identifying the students that are in the building that also have credit recovery. And then in the afternoons, having meetings with them, either small groups, depending on the relationship, or individual meetings to pull them out of that targeted instruction at a collaborative time when their teachers are able to let them go, to talk through what exactly do you need to graduate? How are we going to get this work done? Do you need to stay after school, after that 2:10 time, because that's when you can officially start your credit recovery time? And so they've actually been pulling the kids and holding on to them for lack of a better term, but holding on to them to support them through that credit recovery process, which is that problem and disconnect that we're having right now with 916 is no one's kind of owning the kids when it's time to do that credit recovery. So that's another opportunity that our schools have been able to really capitalize on. Our counselors are excited about, and we're having more kids get those credits taken care of now, as opposed to later during the summer or not graduating on time.
So if I could jump in for a minute, obviously a lot of heroic efforts going on here to support students and you know, in this worldwide pandemic that we're in. And thank you for all your efforts. I am concerned about our Asian students. That is not a good trend to have, you know, more of them this year than last year having no credit. Is it that, you know, they're taking care of other brothers and sisters, or you know, what's going on with
If I'm sorry, Nancy, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you done? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just curious, you know, from the principals, you know, what is happening with what's your perspective relative to your Asian students and their families?
Well, I don't want to make assumptions. I will give you one data point that right now at North for distance learning, 78% of our Asian students are in distance learning, which is by far our highest percentage. I think there's a number of reasons. Without question, the conversation and climate around the Asian hate crimes that are going on, it certainly plays into it. I also know that COVID has had a more significant impact in terms of the health factor on the Asian community. You know, as far as the other reasons, I don't want to speculate and assume that it's one reason or the other, but I know that just alone, the number of kids that are at home, other students that are at home is significantly higher than any other group. I wish they were all here, all 1,600 plus of them, but they're not. And so.
Is it a problem of technology access or?
Not, I don't believe so. Not that I know of. You know, of course, we hit off many requests for connectivity issues at the beginning of the school year at all of our schools in 622, and I think those have died off almost entirely. You know, we are of course 1-to-1, and so everybody's got a laptop or more, and so we have more digging to do on that for sure.
What I was just going to add is we actually have contracted with a researcher to do a whole research proposal on looking into all of our students who have, who've opted for distance learning, but those who've come in person as well. One of the things we want to do is collect high quality data, and you know, real experts in research would tell you, if you're going to have focus groups with students, you have folks that know those students who share racial and culture groups with them, and have those groups be together when they be interviewed or talk about their experiences. And we're really interested in collecting high quality data, not only related to the anecdotal experiences of our students during the pandemic, both in person or at home learning and distance learning, but crosswalking that with any kind of student outcome data we may have regarding credit achievement, grades, testing scores, graduation rates, so that we can kind of try to figure out what story might lie within this data that we can kind of take a look at. But again, that data needs to be collected through very specific people who have similar language, culture, racial backgrounds of the students that they'd be doing those focus groups with, but we want to collect it in a really strategic way that might give us some fairly statistically reliable data. And that's what we're working on right now. And it'll probably be taking place throughout late spring and early summer. So there will be some more data coming for that soon. And that's exactly what Principal Wolf said, is we don't want to make assumptions about why people might be staying home. We have thoughts about it, but we want to actually find out from the community why people are making those choices.
Well, yeah, I wasn't expecting you to make assumptions, but the principals say that they talk to the students,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, for
And
sure.
so I imagine they're hearing from them what some of their issues are. I was just wondering, what some of those issues are. Mhm. Ms. Thompson, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
I mean, I think one of the general just challenges is that students, now that we've been able for trimester 3, which began at the beginning of March, now that we're able to have our students in person again, is that the kids who are with us are doing better because they're with their teachers. They're getting that extra dose of one-on-one small group support in the afternoon times. They're also getting all of that live instruction and being in the building in the classroom during the day. They also have different supports, and all of our staff are around like every passing time, every second out in the halls. Can I help you? Do you know what you're doing? Do you need help with anything? So being that we have such a high percentage of students, 57% of students at both schools that are at home, it's really hard for us to reach some of them and to figure out what some of those barriers are to engaging and to logging on. So I do think that research is going to be helpful. I also would say when we're looking specifically into the data, and I have like another computer screen with all these charts on it that was a little bit too much to share in the presentation. But when we're looking right now at, we had an increase in number of students with the no credit in 3 different racial groups. They were American Indian, our Asian student group, and our African American student group. But when we talk about the numbers, and not to say that the numbers aren't anything, but our increase for our American Indian students was from 5 students to 7 students as far as having a no credit grade. So there's an increase of 2 students.
Mhm.
So that's really specific to what's going on with those students, as well as did our population change by 2 students potentially from last year to this year. For our Asian students, we have 6 more students this year than we did last year with the no credit. So again, something where we need to find out what do specific individual kids need,
Mhm.
but it's, I think the percentages sometimes skew it and make it seem a little bit different than it is for our other student group, where we saw an increase in no credits. It went from 81 students with no credit to 87 students with no credit. And so again, 6 student difference. So we need to find out what's going on with the kids, but also at this level of detail, it's really, are they coming? Are they not? Do they have what they need, to your point? And that's what we're finding out. But I also, I'm really appreciative of our district and the interest of looking into that larger data piece of what's going on with large student groups, large specific student groups, especially Asian, using the example from North, student groups that are choosing to stay home. How can we better understand what's happening there?
Mhm. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will add one more thing, just if I'm being totally honest, in terms of the connectivity to the kids, and I certainly, and
I think being totally honest is acceptable. Sure.
yeah, well, I'm just kind of out, just stating some of the obvious, maybe that the ability to connect with kids this year has been extra frustrating this year for some of the obvious reasons. And even when they are here, especially in the hybrid where they're only coming 1 or 2 days a week, the conversations were not flowing in the hallways. You got masks on, of course. The engagement in class is not where we want it to be, not where any teacher wants it to be. It's been so unfortunately, this is my first year at North. I know an awful lot of Maplewood kids that have come this way. But I have had fewer conversations with kids than any year in my entire educational career. So
yeah,
maybe we can.
I remember there was a researcher at Columbia University who used to talk about the success for the students depends on one arm around one child. And, we're not able to do that right now. I mean, physically, electronically, I guess, but I mean, it's a challenge, but thanks for all you're doing. I know it's a challenge, but I look forward to that, and I know you do too, those relationships again, because I think that will make a difference.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also want to add, there was a talk about technology and connectivity. And I don't want to speak for Josh, but I think Josh and I talked about accessibility maybe a couple months ago, and he assured me that all the students are getting all the laptops and the technology that they need to be able to access courses. Right, Josh? So it's not about access to technology and connectivity to internet.
You are correct, Director Natardi. That is accurate. The ones that we for sure know about that have been reached out to us from social workers and whatnot definitely have access with either a hotspot or having their costs subsidized through internet provider.
I just wanted to make a comment. I appreciate your intention and your thoughtfulness in the phases and laying out the schedule for the day, as well as the support systems. And just listening to all of the time and energy that we're pouring into our students and making sure they are being taken care of. They're our first stakeholder. How are your staffs, how are your educators and your staff feeling in your schools? Because, you know, it is a top-down kind of piece where our students are the ones receiving our service, and we want to make sure who's delivering the service is feeling supported. So when we talk about the trauma and the things that have been going on with the pandemic and in our community and globally, that doesn't just affect our students, it affects our educators in the classrooms and in the schools as well. So just if you can shed any thoughts or comments on how your staff are doing or what kind of supports are in place for them to kind of give them morale and motivation.
I guess I'll go first. I think it's been a roller coaster, and I think they're in a decent place right now. Of course, we can see the finish line at the end of the year, but I will say that, and I'll speak to the teacher piece, and I'll state the obvious, what they've been asked to do this year has been so unbelievably challenging. You know, I don't know how to describe it, but there's been a very prevalent feeling of kind of your worth as a teacher has been diminished because you can't meet the needs of the kids as well as you have in the past, and all those things that teachers have been doing for 5, 10, 15 years in terms of student engagement or how they're delivering their you know, content or engaging the students, they've had to reinvent the wheel, right? And so I think that's been a challenge for them. At North specifically, I'm still getting to know some staff here in the building, and I haven't stood in front of the staff here at North once in terms of physically in the same room, and so that brings some challenges in itself. And so we are offering in a number of different ways in terms of connections with counselors and social workers, and we talk about self-care, and we talk about recently we've been talking about tapping out, right? So teachers have been challenged also by all these conversations that have been in our community, right? Both here locally and otherwise. Those have come up in different ways, and those are really hard for teachers deciding like how deep I get engaged in those, or do I at all, or how do I provide the right space for the kids and not do damage. And so they're doing really well with it. But it's also, it's a grind. You know, I'm stating, I think the obvious, and I don't know if Ms. Thompson's got something different, but I'm excited for them to finish off the year as well.
I had some of the same concerns that Nancy did when I first saw the data for our Asian students going from 12% to 22%. But Ty and Kevin, I am really impressed with the work that you and your teams have done. I think that the rates will drop, the stats will get better for us, and it's really evident that we do invest a lot in our kids, and I just want to thank you for all that work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Principal Wolfen-Thompson, thank you again for coming, for sharing the update. I know it's super busy time. I told Christine that I felt bad for asking you to come to present at the end of the year. but she said you're always busy, so it doesn't matter. And also thank you for your leadership in a really difficult school year, and hopefully next year will be better.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you all.
you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, take care of yourself, okay?
We'll try.
Okay.
Thank you both.
All right, and then Christine, you have program updates, it looks like.
Yes, happy to. Let me just share my screen here for a moment. And hopefully I can do that. Oh, darn. My computer has been acting weird. Give me just one moment. I apologize. I'm going to have to jump on this other one. I have two laptops, just like Ty said. I'm got two laptops in front of me all the time, and sometimes one of them doesn't always work. So with sharing or something goofy happens. So my apologies. Give me just one quick moment. I'll jump on this one and then I can share that way. I'm going to mute myself on this one and jump. My apologies for that. Hopefully, can everybody hear me now? Thank you. All right, here we go. Hopefully this will work too. Golly, I've been having more Zoom problems after a whole year of doing Zooms. Here we go. So I'm going to just start with a quick program update. This is kind of a shorter presentation than your last one, but wanted to buzz through just a couple of things for you to be aware of this evening. First of all, you've heard us talk about our online school. We're having a lot of conversations, and part of why we want to do some research about the experiences folks have had this past year is so that as we move forward with our permanent online school, we can learn some things about what works, what doesn't work. The wonderful thing about online school when it does exist is that it's hopefully won't be a pandemic and students can come in person for supports and activities along the way. But as you know, if you saw my board, oh, hang on, let me hide our pictures here. Just last Friday, for the first time after many months of going back and forth, we finally got approval for our 622 online school. One of the things I wanted to share is that you know that even before the pandemic, we were already working to develop our online high school. So that's been in the works for a bit of time now. The 1920 school year, we had 13 online courses. This current school year, and this is not counting the pandemic and distance learning, this is just classes that were already built to be online courses. We had 18 for this year, and next year at the high school level, we were going to have 50. As you know, as part of our online program, as part of our community outreach, we have learned that there are a lot of families who actually want to have their students in a permanent online school. So we are launching the middle school and elementary as well. We know that we have already over 200 students who, prior to the pandemic, live in District 622, but open enroll to an online charter school anyway. So they're already, before the pandemic even, we're already in an online school. We would like to be able to offer one so they can be in an online school that's here at home in their home district. We also know that we have about 250 families who are currently homeschooling their children, and we believe that an online school might be an option some might be interested in pursuing with us as well. We've been seeing quite an interest among our families for this. So this is a brand new development. We finally got that approval on last Friday. So this is new information for us as well. So we'll be working on that. And that's a big part of why we want to do a good job analyzing and looking at the data of the experiences people have had this past year so we can learn from that. I want to talk too about this dual immersion program. When a little bit later on the agenda, you have a resolution. We've all talked about the immersion programs that we're planning, but we're going to be formalizing it with a board resolution, just saying that we are for the year 2022 going to be moving forward with starting these programs. Again, this came out of some surveys of our birth to age 3 families, those with young preschool age children and families, what they were looking for, and many were really expressing an interest in immersion programming. As you know, we have identified 3 target languages, And this came again out of our survey data. The number one response was folks looking for Spanish immersion. The second largest group was looking for Mandarin Chinese, and the third largest group was looking for Hmong. So what we are interested in doing is when we do all of our reshuffling, because our schools are closing and the boundaries are changing in the fall of 22, that's when we're going to begin with one kindergarten section of each of these programs. And this is just a visual to show you. Up at the top, you'll see Carver, Castle, and Richardson are the three sites identified for the reasons I've explained previously that will have these programs. So in the first year, fall of 22-23, there'll be 3 immersion kindergartens, one at Carver, one at Castle, and one at Richardson. The second year, the 23-24 school year, each of these 3 schools will have 2 classrooms, a kindergarten classroom, and a first grade classroom. And as you can see, every year thereafter, we will be adding another class in that sequence so that eventually it'll grow its way up through the 5th grade. I've already talked to you a little bit about the fact that we have been looking to hire our current principal of Weaver Elementary, Peng Shua Shang, because she has lots of experience in immersion programming to oversee the development of all 3 of these programs. Now, one thing I wanted to just explain, when you hear about immersion, I put this slide together just so you could kind of understand kind of the difference between dual immersion and what's regular immersion. People might ask that question. There's going to be a lot more professional development and more information coming about this. But just so you know, dual immersion, when it's called dual immersion, it has to do with who is enrolled in the program. So dual immersion programs enroll native and non-native speakers of the target language. So for example, if the target language is Hmong, a native speaker of the target language would be Hmong speakers, and non-native speakers could be English speakers, but they can also be speakers of other languages as well. The same is true. So dual immersion programs really promote diversity by bringing together both native and non-native speakers. Dual immersion is sometimes called two-way immersion. You might hear it called two-way bilingual immersion. One-way immersion are typically only enroll non-native speakers. Sometimes that's referred to as a Canadian model. So like if, for example, in a community, they want to have a Mandarin immersion program, but there really aren't Mandarin speakers that live in that community, they might enroll primarily English-speaking students to learn Mandarin together, but there's not as much going to be a target to enroll native speakers of the target language, in that case, Mandarin, just as an example. Dual immersion programs can also be called heritage language programs. So when part of your intention is also to preserve a language that has seen a generational decline in the number of native speakers of that language. So there's a lot of indigenous languages that have been developed in heritage language programs. And Hmong is also one of those, where there's a decline in the native speakers of Hmong as a primary language. And so that can also is included in that category of heritage language programming. Why would families choose dual immersion? Well, if you're a native speaker of that target language, so let's say you're a Hmong speaker or a Spanish speaker, you might be interested in a dual immersion program because it gives you an opportunity to really expand your academic language along with the reading and writing skills for that language as well. So growing my kids, I raised my kids in a Spanish immersion school, even though they spoke Spanish at home and were very fluent. By having them in an immersion program, they learned how to do math and science and content area and develop academic language and writing and reading skills in that target language. Non-native speakers, so let's say you're an English speaker and you enroll in a dual immersion program with Spanish as your target language. The non-native speakers, so in this case, your English speakers of that target that are non-native to that target language, they actually learn Spanish much better because it's not just the teacher they're learning from, it's the peers on the playground, it's who you have lunch with. When you have people next to you sitting in the lunchroom who speak the target language natively, you're going to learn it better. So there's a benefit on both sides for dual immersion programs for both of those populations that you enroll in the program. So I wanted to just walk through a little bit of the timeline of a couple things happening up. So, you know, we talked about this online school opening next year. The leader in charge of that is going to be Sean Cotterman, who you've met, and under the direction of Josh Anderson as well. Next year is a planning year for our immersion programs, right? So online school starts because we're already rolling with that. Dual immersion next year is a planning year under the direction of Peng Shua Shang. And then all throughout next year, there's going to be a lot of welcome events for the families that will be changing schools the following years. You will be hearing more as our staff get ready to the bidding process and how they're going to be enrolling in the schools after after some school closures and things happen. And then of course, the construction continuing and the high school renovations getting underway. Now, 22-23 is a big year for us. That's the year that our new boundaries take effect. All of the renovated and new middle schools will open. Elementaries and middles will open. Our dual immersion programs begin. And as I mentioned, those 4 schools that we've been talking about for several years will actually be closing at that time. And Tartan and North construction will be getting underway. So I just want you to kind of have a visual to kind of how these pieces all fit together, since there's so many moving parts happening at the moment. And so I just wanted to take a moment and pause and see what questions do you have at this time. We have a much more detailed plan underway that Peng Shua and I have been working on with regard to the immersion programming and all of that, but I wanted to give you kind of the very basics of the timeline on that. And we'll do a lot more work with that as well as we head into the coming school year.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Christine, you can always count on me on having a question.
Always welcome.
So I'm a big proponent of a dual emergent program. I know that I have studied child development and know that it does it does actually help in cognitive development of children. And I myself my parents moved a lot when I was growing up and had to learn languages and languages and languages every place I moved. So yeah, so I know all of that. But my question, I wholeheartedly support the program. But the chart that you showed goes up to 5th grade. What kind of programs are we going to have in middle school and high school? My kids took world languages when they were in Isd622, and we did not have options for Hmong and Mandarin. Yeah, so what are they going to do in high school? What's the plan?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked. And I will agree with you, Charlotte. I know we've talked about this before. In my years when my kids were younger, I lived in your neighborhood where you live right now in District 622, and there wasn't an option in 622. So I commuted my kids into St. Paul for many years. It was an exhausting experience. And I'm hopeful that families don't have to keep doing that to go elsewhere. So some of the conversations we're having, typically when an immersion program, so when this first cohort gets its way, although we're not going to wait till this cohort. First, I want to talk about the immersion cohort. So when these kindergartners in 27-28 are finishing 5th grade, we're going to have our middle schools ready to continue immersion programs. So there's 2 ways to look at this, and I'm actually going to stop my share so I can look at everybody because I like to see people's faces. So for the immersion students, when they get to middle schools and high schools, we have to take a look at what languages we're going to offer in the target language. So what typically, and I've spent a lot of years overseeing immersion schools in St. Paul, and what we typically do is when you get to a middle school, we look at least 1 to 2 of their classes in 6th grade would be offered in the target language. So part of what happens is you end up looking at who do you have available to hire, who can, for example, if your target language, if the class is going to be math class or language arts or science or social studies for those immersion kids, or for native speakers who can handle it at that level. But the other thing that we've been talking about, one of the problems and concerns with immersion, at least in my opinion, is that if you didn't get your child in kindergarten and you missed the boat, then all of a sudden it's too late for your child to be in immersion school. And we don't want to have a system where that's the only way you get to learn a world language. So what we're talking about right now is, first and foremost, how do we expand electives in our middle schools? Right now, you don't get to start a world language in District 622 until 8th grade. We would like to bring that earlier for all students, ideally 6th grade, but for sure 7th grade and maybe 6th grade. We're in a lot of conversations with our middle school leaders right now about when these new middle schools open, how can we bring that world language into lower grades? But the other thing that's really important, when you have, like for immersion schools, we don't want our other students to not have those experiences. So what we're looking at is what are the ways we can bring world language experiences in elementary school with some classes, camps in the summer. Some of the best immersion schools offer, for example, camps where, let's say youngest sibling gets to go to the immersion school because they got in time, but they already have a third or fourth or fifth grade brother or sister. What can we do? Because families typically want to learn the language together. Can we offer camps, classes for families? Many parents want to expand their own language learning experiences as well. And so trying to offer more through community education and different opportunities as well. So we want to have a very comprehensive world language approach in District 622 that can really take a broader look at what we can offer and really expand what we're currently doing. No other countries in the world limit bilingualism in the way our country does, and we really want to change that. So I think that's part of our exciting part with having Peng Shua come on board and help us lead this program next year. We're going to have a whole team working together about how do we map out all the different experiences, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's just so critically important for building world citizens. You know, we have to have our students in these environments.
Do you guys have any ideas of how you'll get the word out for both the online school and the immersion schools, just to make sure, like new kindergarten parents that have kindergartners that are going to be starting in 22, 23, how will everyone know that this is going to be offered?
Oh, many ways. We're going to have all of our, first of all, Josh has been great already reaching out to the online families interested in online. We had to wait till we got this approval, which we just got on Friday, to really market it in the way we want to, because we needed to make sure we were an approved provider for online school for next year. Major outreach going to, and I'll let Josh speak to that because he's in charge of all of that work right now.
You bet. Thank you for the question. So, you know, one of the things that comes with the approval to be an online provider is that we can enroll any student from across the entire state of Minnesota. And that's what's really exciting for our program, is that we can offer this to students who don't live in 622. We of course want to offer it to those who are here in 622, but we are finalizing our marketing plan as we speak, as far as mailings and advertisements on social media. We have a video being finalized right now to kind of promote the program as well. And so right now we're kind of in the final stages of getting things cleaned up so we can market this program within the next week to week and a half to get the word out to the community and surrounding areas.
And relating to the immersion program, there'll be a lot of outreach that's going to go. I have a feeling the programs will fill up quickly, but one of the important parts with dual immersion is to really market to native speakers of those target languages. So it's not just English speaking families coming in, but we want, and by the way, the word is already, we've had more Hmong families calling us because they've already heard about it and they're interested in getting their children enrolled. And you know, one thing, our Latino community, many of our families of whom we purposely took a look at where landfall was going to be assigned in the boundary changes, because landfall families, we have a lot of our Spanish speaker families there, and they've been asking for this for several years now. So we wanted to make sure that when we looked at the boundaries and landfall was going to be assigned to Carver, that would be where the dual Spanish immersion goes, because our Spanish speaking families have been asking for this for quite some time and they're thrilled already. And the word is definitely out in the community because they're already hearing about it. But there'll definitely be conversations. You know, every year when we put out information for kindergarten registration, we put that out usually in December each year for incoming kindergartners for the following year. We'll be talking a lot about that already. And also with all of our families in the 4-year-old program, we'll be talking about that ahead of time as well to make sure that people are aware of this option that will be available to them beginning in 22. And the calls are coming. People are hearing the word already. I can promise you, it's been really fun to hear the excitement in the community.
Christine, I'll say that when I joined the board, an immersion program was a priority for me. Personally, I had 3 preschool age kids and I wanted them to have the opportunity to learn a second language. And unfortunately, that didn't happen for my children. And over the years, I've met many neighbors who send their children outside of 622 because they do want their kids to have those immersion programs. So I'm thrilled that in the future, our 622 students will have that opportunity. It's a big deal for me, and I'm glad that the stars kind of aligned, and I'm glad, Christine, that you kind of had the courage to take on this challenge, because I know there was so many things happening, but I think I think it's the right time. So thank you for everyone who's working on that.
And I'll just add one other thing, if I could. Our bilingual SEALs exam, I'm going to be sending you a promotional video that was just completed, because we worked really hard a few years ago to make sure that we offer students the ability to get credit for their home language before they graduate high school. And we've got an amazing promotional video that Mari just finished with Josh and team to really help. And so many of our families, we're doing a lot of outreach to our families. If your child speaks another language, they can take an exam their senior year of high school that will earn them not only high school credits, but also college credits. And I talked about this, I've shared my own personal experience. You know, my daughter, during her time in 622 in middle school and high school, never took a Spanish class. She only took French. But she took the bilingual SEALs exam and earned 4 years of high school credit in Spanish on her Tartan High School transcript and 3 years of college credit for taking one exam. And we worked hard during my years in St. Paul schools to get that moving forward, because so often colleges, especially some higher level colleges, want kids to have at least a couple of years of a world language in high school. But we had so many students who already speak another language, sometimes 2 or 3 languages, and they weren't even getting credit for their home language they already speak. And so this opportunity, this bilingual SEALs exam, is a really amazing opportunity that the state of Minnesota offers. And quite frankly, not enough high schools around are offering it. And we're so proud of the fact that we do offer it. And we do a lot of outreach to our families. And it can be taken, we even offer it in Lakota and Ojibwe, and many, we had a student just take it in Russian, many students, and it simply gives you credit for a language you already know. But one of the layers, you get better scores on it if you can read it and write it and speak it. Here, reading, writing, listening, speaking. And so our families are really looking for more opportunities for their students to practice the reading and writing pieces as well, even if they're bilingual and very fluent at home. And so we want to really make an effort to do more support for that in our schools at all levels for our families and our students. So high priority for us.
I would just want to echo what Michelle said too. And in all the years of running for public office, the immersion school is something that has always come up in conversation, and I think you're going to find a great deal of support in the community for it. It'll be interesting, in my viewpoint, I think it'll be interesting to see if we can keep up with the demand as people learn more about it, because it's just something that people seem to value a lot.
Which is great.
And aren't we anticipating a huge influx of young families when that Oakdale development comes through? And this is, you know, relative to your marketing plan, it seems like this is the right time, because, you know, obviously that's a few years off, but then we're a few years off on this plan too. So it seems like the timing will be good.
You know, she doesn't like to brag, but Principal Thompson, who you just met, years ago when I was an immersion principal, I hired her as a young teacher, and she was a 4th grade immersion teacher. So she also speaks Spanish and taught 4th grade full-time in Spanish as well. So she's definitely a woman with many gifts and talents as well. So kind of fun. And Amy Lee, our HR director, has lots of experience hiring immersion teachers over the years as well. So we've got some great talents on our team here as well. So. All right, should I jump to the next one, Michelle? So I just have a quick COVID update for you. I know I've been trying to include a little bit of that every time. And many of you know that COVID is on the rise right now, again, sadly. We're hoping it's a temporary uptick, but I always just like to give you a chance. As you remember, this is the dashboard, and I always put in case you ever want to look yourself, I always put the link at the bottom of the slide for where that came from. So this is the State Department of Health dashboard about, and remember, this was that original model that they created that said, you know, if it gets above 20 case rates per 10,000 people, then this should happen. If it gets above 30, this should happen. But of course, those guidelines changed when they put some other mitigation measures in place. But you could see we'd gotten fairly low, but in the last few times, we've been seeing an uptick for sure. Now, this is a 2-week lag. The Department of Health has a 2-week lag on their reporting. So we also like to look at this one that was put together by a professor at the University of Minnesota. And this professor looks at real-time data. It hasn't been cleaned up yet by the health department, but it's fairly accurate. And we've done some runs to see how close to accurate it is. It's really quite amazing. So black boxes are where the Minnesota Department of Health has reported. And the blue triangle is where they believe we're going to be next. And the purple is what they think is going to happen in the next 7 days. So this is Ramsey County, looking at about 41. You can see it looks like they're predicting it's going to level off a little bit here. And again, this is a slide I took last Friday, so it's not totally current as of today, but I put it in board book last Friday. And then here again is the prediction for Washington County. It looks like they are predicting it to sort of have peaked, and now we might be seeing the decline there. You all know about our COVID dashboard. And this is put together by our health office and that team every week. And it always shows the data from the previous week. So that's always in here every time. And then I just put, there's a daily situation update, and I put this link in here. So if you click on this, there's a place here where you can go and look at facilities with cases and exposures, and every month or every day it updates, and it shows you by county which schools have outbreaks. And I'll just tell you that this entire school year, and I got to look and see, hopefully we're not on there yet, but the entire school year, we have never been on this list, not even once. And I wanted to point that out because we get a lot of frustration. And you can see Woodbury High School, East Ridge High School, Stillwater High School, you know, there's a lot of schools that end up on this, but I think it's worth noting, and I purposely put on here, our nurses, you know, get a lot of pushback. Quarantining is really hard on kids, and I've had calls just today from families. It's so hard on kids. But I just wanted to point out, in an entire year, we've never had an outbreak because they've been able to stop it with the case that comes in the door is contact traced, and they spend hours and hours and hours doing this. And I just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out here. Now, I'm worried as soon as I put this slide up here, now we're going to end up on the list someday, but I'm hopeful that's not the case. All of our staff have had the opportunity now to be vaccinated. And I say opportunity because there are a few who have opted not to be vaccinated, some for personal reasons and some for medical reasons. But I wanted to let you know that there was a whole bunch of opportunities that we worked to coordinate resources with the state, the county, private programs and whatnot. And I know we've talked about end of year, what that's going to look like this year. I want to just remind you, remember last year when we couldn't have an in-person graduation and we put together this whole students coming and taking a graduation photo? That was so popular last year that we're doing it again. And I think that's going to become a permanent thing we do because it's so wonderful for families to have that opportunity and to see that slide deck of all the students in their graduation robes. So that's a little bit of the overview. I wanted to just add one thing that has just happened since I sent you this slide deck on Friday. We got a call from a connection we have at Alina Health Clinics, and who happens to be married to a teacher at North High School. And they are really working hard to see if they can get us a clinic at both Tartan and North for vaccines for teenagers ages 16 and up. And I'm just so grateful for the connections we have because they said, would you be interested? I said, yes, tell us when, we'll get it started immediately. So kids would sign a permission, have their parents sign a permission form, but if we can get students vaccinated right on site, I told them, whatever you need from us, we will make it happen. We'll go bus kids in, even those on distance learning. If they want to come in, we'll go send a bus to pick them up. We'll figure it out. So there's some really cool progress happening right now. We're going to try to see what we can do to get our students vaccinated and break down barriers for that as well.
So I'm glad you just said that because that was going to be my question. When Evan was here, I couldn't really ask him the question about the PSA messaging that's going on in the school district about vaccine for 16 plus, because I personally feel like I don't know. I feel like maybe it's a parental responsibility, or, you know, but it's also our responsibility to let them know of the availability of the vaccine opportunities that they have. So I'm wondering how are you handling both the school and the parents? Because I know that some parents are adamant that it is their responsibility to talk about the vaccine to their children. But then we have this opportunity. So how do we
with that,
the two?
It's a great question. And quite frankly, the conversation will be only with the parents, because students who are not over 18 do not actually get the authority to decide if they're going to be vaccinated or not. Their parents have to make that decision with them. So there will be a lot of outreach with regard to folks who are language, cultural specific outreach to help people ask questions if they have them, allow parents if they want to come and be there with their child, they can do so. There's also the conversation they're having about this clinic would be absolutely no asking, even asking for any medical card, not even saying, do you have insurance? Show it to me. None of that with this clinic that we would be setting up. And actually, they have some ways that they can do it that would be really protecting the privacy, because it's also a privacy issue. People won't have the opportunity to know who else, you know, even right now, we can't ask our employees if you've been vaccinated or not, because there's medical data there involved, you know. And so with regard to this, it'll be a lot of it will be the communication through the families. Obviously we will be letting, you know, we typically try to include students if there's some information going home, but it's going to be, if your family wants this for you, then this will be an option that we available. So really trying to collaborate with our parents. Now, if a child is over 18, it's a little, even if a child is 18, we still want to communicate with that family, because if my child's 18 and no one's told me you're vaccinating my child, and you know, at school, I would want to know as a parent as well. So we do kind of try to do both, but yeah, it's very much a family decision. And so, but also we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to ask the questions they might have about the vaccines, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who are nervous about the vaccine for all kinds of reasons, as you all know. I mean, there's the trauma, the medical trauma that's happened in our communities of color with horrible testing that happened in years past with vaccinations and things like that. There's mistrust of organization. Yeah, for sure. And so we need to be mindful of that, and do it in a way that's not judging, but offering. And doing it in a way that's offering through families, because we want them to have those opportunities, you know. Any other questions about all that? I will say, because community spread is high, we are quarantining more students, and that's not very fun. But we're grateful that at least our teachers are doing distance learning at the same time. So when they do go home, they're able to stay on top of their learning at the same time and at least stay connected to the instruction that's happening.
Yeah, I have a little granddaughter in J.J. Hill Elementary in St. Paul, who a kindergartner, and one of the kids got COVID. So all of a sudden, it threw everything in her and my daughter's family and my family, you know, because she has a job, and who's going to take the kindergartner, and there's all this transportation issues, and oh my goodness, it just got really complicated.
I know. I was just at Cowan the other day, and I walked into a classroom and the teacher was in there, and I said, "Oh, is your class at one of the specialists right now?" She goes, "No, my class is all at home. I'm teaching them right now." I go, "Oh, sorry to interrupt." Her class had been quarantined. And once our staff have been vaccinated, they don't have to quarantine with them. So she's sitting in her classroom alone with all her kids on the screen, and they were all at home.
Sure. Yeah.
What unusual times we're in, right?
Yeah, very much so.
All right, well.
Yeah. Christine, do you think with the vaccines becoming more available to our 18-year-old students and then 16 and 17-year-olds, do you think that we'd be able to shorten the length of quarantine in case those students get affected?
Mhm. Yeah, I do believe so. I'll have to double check the guidance is changing all the time. I know with adults, if your class is quarantined and you've been vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine with them. And I suspect it would be the same with teens, but I'll have to double check what the latest guidance is.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
Wouldn't you have to know about the herd immunity though?
With regard to quarantining?
Yeah.
So the way it works right now, so let's say if I'm a teacher, for example, and a student tests positive in my class, with the contact tracers and what they go with, the guidance from the health department is you have to look at who that child was near within a 6-foot radius. If they were near anybody for up to a total of 15 minutes, and it could have been a few minutes here and there throughout the day, but for a total of 15 minutes or more, and anybody who was in that radius has to go home and quarantine for 14 days. But according to the current guidance from the CDC and the health department, if I've been vaccinated and it's been more than 2 weeks since my last dose, I don't have to be quarantined with the others who are in that 6-foot radius.
But you're not gonna know the data because that's private data, right?
With regard to the teacher? Oh yeah, so
No,
what we
with regard to the students.
Yeah, right. So we would say you're going to be quarantined unless you've been vaccinated, and then they would have to decide what they want to say, what the families would say. We haven't really dealt with this with students yet, but with staff, the message is you're going to be assigned to quarantine unless you've been vaccinated. And so then they will tell us if they've been vaccinated or if they need to quarantine or if they don't need to quarantine. Yeah. But you're right, with students, it's going to be interesting as more students get vaccinated, you know, we're going to have to work with families. Your child's been identified as a close contact. And I think it's going to come down to families saying whether their child has been vaccinated or not and proving it probably. And just like in schools, we do collect vaccination records of other vaccinations, right? So I imagine there's going to be more guidance coming along with regard to that along the way as well.
All right, thank you, Christine, for yet another COVID update.
Right, you've seen those graphs so many times, right?
I'll just jump
okay,
in real quick too. Based on what Charlotte was talking about, that'll probably be a big thing to work on this summer as well. When we come into the fall, is, you know, I'm guessing maybe they'll open it up vaccinations even more, and I could see that being like a big undertaking that we'll have to go through to see, you know, just like with any vaccination, what that looks like for next year.
And our nurses spend a lot, thank you, Ben. Our nurses do spend a lot of time those first few weeks of school checking vaccination records, phone calling for someone who's missing, hasn't turned in their vaccine records yet. That's a lot of what happens every year. And I think it's gonna continue to become an even greater piece of work that we're gonna have to do every year as we get ready, especially with this. But hopefully as vaccinations become more available, we'll be able to see less interruptions to schooling, I hope.
Christine, do we have tests available for our employees at the schools? Do
Every
they
2 weeks.
regularly take that? Okay.
Yep. And we actually now are offering tests for students.
Oh.
Yep.
Good.
All right. Next on the agenda is communication and technology, Josh, with a boundary presentation.
Good evening, Chair Yenner, directors of the board, Superintendent Tucci Osorio, and cabinet. So earlier this month, 2 of our boundary committee representatives shared the proposal with you for the boundary scenario. I will recap that presentation at this time, and then later on in the meeting, you will be asked to take official action on the recommendation. So just a review of the timeline. Dating back to the fall of 2017, you can start that we started these conversations about our facilities and the potential of if our community had an appetite to move 5th grade to middle school to mitigate some of the overcrowding. The feedback from the community was that that wasn't something they wanted to undertake. And so we went back to the drawing board, came up with a new facilities plan that you can see resulted in Cass and Richardson going under construction, followed by a bond referendum in 2019. You can see our boundaries work at this point in time, leading up to the new boundaries taking effect in the fall of 2022. So our 622 boundary committee, they were representative of our community, including community members, parents, staff, students, district facilitators, and our boundary consultant. We had district and area experts, including Wold Architects, our 622 transportation services supervisor, our former state demographer, and then we had folks from the cities of Oakdale and Maplewood, along with staff from teaching and learning and student services. In total, our boundary committee spent over 12 hours of meeting over 2 months from February through March. The learning work, the first 4 hours was learning from the experts, followed by learning about building capacities, our transportation, and our growth trends in our communities. And then finally, 8 hours plus 8 plus hours, of small group work and large group work of actually developing our boundary scenario recommendation. Just a reminder of the charge, you've seen this dating back a few months now. The charge of that 622 boundary committee was to develop new boundaries to be implemented in the fall of 2022. They will use the school board's guiding principles, our mission statement, and the expertise of district leadership to provide the foundation for the boundaries. And the committee members were expected to strive for boundaries that created equitable learning environments for all learners, boundaries that will serve our community now and into the future, and efficiently utilize our district resources. And a recap of the guiding principles, again, they will be largely contiguous, balancing out our socioeconomic status, balancing out our school communities of color and spoken languages. We want them to last for between 5 and 7 years. Limit time on the bus, keep walking distances to a half mile for elementary school students, and then finally with our open enrolled and inter-district transfer students following our current process and keeping students together to the extent possible. And so just a snapshot of our current 622 school boundaries with our 9 elementary schools. Again, this is a map of our current boundaries. And then a map of our recommended proposal for the fall of 2022, 2023. Again, when we reduce from 9 elementary schools down to 7, this is the proposed map. We did have a public input period from April 8th to the 21st. We had information on our boundary project website, communication out to families. We had a 622 news postcard that would have hit mailboxes during the week of April 12th. And then we had numerous stakeholder meetings from elementary PTO, PTA leads to our Latino parent group, our American Indian Ed parent council, to virtual community meetings for Eagle Point, Allen Page Elementary, Carver, and Richardson. From that feedback that came in, we did run suggestions through our boundary software to see if it would uphold to our guiding principles. And if, a suggestion that came in was to move an area. We took a look at the data to see if the building capacity would be able to be sustained, what that did to our demographics and whatnot. So we were committed to looking at all the recommendations and suggestions that came into our feedback line. Again, we have our boundary project website. It's isd622.org/boundary project. This is going to remain live. After tonight, if you all take action, this is not going to go away. This is just the start of this next phase of our boundary process. And so this website is going to remain live for quite some time. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of our community members who served on the committee. They spent a lot of hours and they gave up their time with their families to develop this boundary scenario. A huge thank you to Jenna Peters, who was my co-facilitator, and to Kristen Tollison, who was our boundary consultant. And again, later on during the action items, we are going to ask you to take action on the recommended scenario that will take effect in the fall of 2022. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time if there are any.
Josh? It's,
Yes.
so, give us an idea of the pushback you got from some folks.
And so we did receive, some feedback. And as I said, all the feedback that came in, that we took the suggestions and we put it through our boundary software. Some of the suggestions that came in as, I live on this side of the freeway and can I stay on the other side of the freeway? And the hard part about our district is we have so many highways and freeways, and it's hard to keep communities within schools on the same side of a freeway, for example. And so that was some of the biggest feedback, was that I'm in a current school, I'm assigned to a new school. Can I please stay in my current school? And we know that this is an emotional process, and families love their school. And so that was some of the biggest feedback that we received was, I'm assigned to a new school. Would it make sense if my neighborhood stayed here because we live on this side of a freeway, or the side of a highway or whatnot, or we're attached to this community? And so that's again some of the biggest feedback we received, as well as families who are intra-district transferred and open enrolled, wondering if they get to stay in their same school. And so after we do have approval of boundaries, we'll be able to have a lot of conversations with families who are open enrolled and intra-district transferred, to see if it makes the most sense for them to stay where they're currently assigned, or if it makes sense for them to go somewhere else. And so we definitely want to keep students and groups together to the extent possible. And so, like I said, the work isn't over at this point in time. We have a lot of work ahead of us still, leading up to the fall of 2022.
If I could
Josh,
echo that. Oh.
I have a follow. So Josh, did you make some changes as a result of this input from the community?
We did make a change, yes. And so we received feedback from a certain area of one elementary school, and we took the data from that neighborhood, ran it through our boundary software, looked at a lot of factors on where it was located. Again, we want to make sure that boundaries can last for 5 to 7 years. We kept to make sure our demographics could stay in check, and that the changes that were proposed to be made sense. And so we did end up moving an area, because we felt as a team, as our district admin team, because of where the community was located, the demographics of that neighborhood, the numbers of kids in that neighborhood, we felt that we could control that neighborhood to a different school, based on our guiding principles. And so, yes, we did make a change based on some feedback.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for, I know you can't make these changes willy-nilly, or we wouldn't have a boundary program.
No.
But I certainly understand that, and I appreciate you taking people's concerns seriously, and really looking at, is this possible to do what they would like you to do? I appreciate that.
And we were, yep, go ahead, Christine, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I want to comment on one thing you just said before we go to the next topic.
Sure. And we were committed in all of our virtual meetings, when we had questions about the boundaries. We told the families in those meetings that we are taking every suggestion that comes in and putting it through our software and our guiding principles. And so we were committed to doing that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was just going to add on to piggyback on what Josh just said about families wanting to have their child grandfathered in. So the boundary changes, but I want to keep my child there. And we're open to all of that. What we want to do, though, is once the boundaries are set, then have a criteria for that. What we don't want is whoever screams the loudest gets to have their child stay at a certain school, and someone who maybe isn't speaking up as much doesn't get that same privilege. So we want to, once the boundaries are set and we look at what our criteria is, for example, is there room in the school? Some of the different, so we have a standard criteria for any of those exceptions that we'll be reviewing after the boundaries get made. So we can be standard in our response and not just promoting privilege is what I was just going to add to that.
I would think too that there'll be some families that have concerns now who may have a different perception as they see the new buildings and have a chance to absorb the changes. My question is can you give me a 50,000 foot view of how the busing will be impacted by the boundary changes? Will we need more bus routes or less bus routes, or more drivers or less drivers? Or because it seems to me that we're going to have more kids going to fewer schools, But I know that that doesn't necessarily translate into needing more buses or anything. Is how did the group look at those kinds of challenges?
And so BJ, our supervisor of transportation, was involved heavily in our process. And so when the committee had a recommendation, we asked the transportation department to look at the recommendation to see how it would impact busing times. And they felt that we would be able to stay within that 30 minutes for most kids to the extent possible. And so there wasn't anything that would throw transportation out of whack with the scenario. And I think eventually, and Christine can add a lot more to this conversation, I think eventually, you know, to tighten up transportation times would be a goal, to be more efficient with our transportation across the district. And I think that down the road, this scenario could allow us to do that.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Josh, could you explain what we did or what the district has done to help to make sure that we reach out to the different groups of various ethnic backgrounds to make sure that their voices are heard and that we get their feedback and their comments?
For sure. Thank you for the question. And so one of the first community group meetings we had was with our Latino parent group. We wanted to make sure that our affinity groups had the information. We also met with our American Indian Parent Council Advisory Council to make sure they had the information, as well as some virtual community groups as well. We had our materials translated, and they've been posted on the website. And our liaisons do a wonderful job with their connections out to the communities to make sure that families receive the information. And again, now that we're at this point in the process, again, we're not done with anything. And so we're going to be continuing to communicate and to reach out with all of our means possible to make sure that families in our district know what the next steps are in this whole process. And one of the things too that I'll add to, if I may as well, one thing that was important to us is that we had diverse representation on our boundary committee. And so our boundary committee was made up of 62% students of color from our community members. And that was important to us to make sure that our committee matched our student demographics, and it closely matched our demographics of our student body. And so it was important that we had diverse voices for the adults in the room that were charged with making this recommendations. And so that was a huge part of our process as well.
That question has also been my question. And I know that Christine, you also had meetings about this, and I'm wondering what the meetings, what the outcomes of the meeting, what kind of input you received from communities of color.
Mm-hmm. So Josh actually hosted the meetings with all those meetings we were in together. So we've had a lot of different meetings. We had all kinds of different questions about, what's a lot of the conversations were, what does this other school look like? What is the transition period going to look like? If I know my child's going to go to that school in 2 years, can I just move them there now? Lots of kind of transition kinds of questions was mainly the kinds of things we had. A lot of discussion about really, and then what does it mean if I've got a young child? Where would they go for pre-K? Pre-K was a really big question that came up a lot. If my child's still going to go to one of the pre-K programs that's not at that school. So quite a variety of different questions. Josh, you want to add to that at all?
I would say one thing that came up a lot too was question about the immersion programs.
Yes.
I'm assigned to this school, but I want to go to this immersion program, and can I do that? And so we received that question quite often in our community meetings with different stakeholders, because they're excited about the immersion programs. And so they were asking those questions now too. So I'm assigned to, let's say I'm assigned to Allen Page, but I really want to go to Carver for Spanish. Can we do that? And so, and concern about busing. And so, yes, we will be providing district transportation for families for the immersion programs. And so that was a question that was always piggybacked with the question of, can I go to a school that has the immersion program?
Mm-hmm.
My last question is actually a petty question. My kids went to Skyview Elementary, and I talked to them and I told them that Skyview Elementary is no longer going to be, and they were saddened by it. I'm just, I know it's petty, but just
not petty at all.
that for for the kids that went through
Mm-hmm.
that school system and went there and went the whole thing, it's going to be, it's hard for the kids to come back home and not be able to say that this is where I went to elementary. But
Well,
I know that it's not, you know.
So just to clarify, with Skyview, the school will still be there, but you know how it had an elementary in the middle in the same building? The middle's going to take over the whole building. So they'll still, they will be lucky enough to be able to go see, but some of our others, like at Oakdale, won't, because Oakdale's property is going to be, the building's going to be taken down so the property can be added to Tartan's property because it's on the border. But you're right. And one of the things we've talked about, and Josh's team has done great too, is we're actually building a virtual museum. So we'll have history. And what we want to do over the next year is collect stories and photographs and things from people from all of our schools so that we start to collect and harvest all these memories so people can have a place to go back and look at things. And I think it could really be a great activity with our alumni to reconnect them with our school district, and it could be really fun. But you're right, it's emotional.
Yeah.
So Charlotte, the school where all three of my kids went will no longer be in service in a couple years. So I empathize with you. I resonate with that. So that just shows you how much power I have, you know. But anyway.
Well, me too. My child went to Skyview too, and I'm the superintendent. I know.
No, it's the right thing to do. I mean, you know, things change, and that building again won't be torn down. Webster, I'm talking about LC Webster. It won't be torn down, but it'll be repurposed, and we will move ahead. So.
If I could add two additional points before we move on here. So to Christine's point about the virtual museum, for you all, look at the employee news when it comes out on Saturday. We're going to have a blurb in there about starting to collect these artifacts, and so there'll be steps and I believe a folder to upload photos and talk about, you know, writing stories or recording audio for this virtual museum. All of our schools will then have a big tote bucket where they can start to put artifacts in a tote so that we can start to collect artifacts. And then as far as our schools who are closing, we just had a meeting, I think it was yesterday, talking about planning closing ceremonies for the buildings who will be closing. And so we'll be talking more about that as we get into next school year, about our, you know, not only ribbon cutting ceremonies eventually for our new buildings, but closing ceremonies for the buildings that are closing.
Sorry, I want to echo what Josh said earlier and thank the Boundary Committee for volunteering their time to understanding the needs of the district and for making those recommendations. Thank you to Josh and Superintendent, and the consultant was Kristen Telson, I believe, and Jenna Peters for their work. I did have the opportunity to go to a few of those listening sessions, and you know, it was interesting. The community members had a chance to share their feedback and get their questions answered. And it was a great way to kind of get a feel for how the community feels about the districts or about the boundaries. And I feel like they were overall positive. And I'm just excited to see the buildings and excited to see an end to the current boundaries. So thank you again to everyone who helped with that work. If there is nothing else, then we'll move to action items. Yeah, okay, thanks. So for the business office, acknowledgements of contributions, and I believe it's Steve again.
Thank you. Minnesota Statute 123B02 permits school boards to receive for the benefit of the district bequests, donations, or gifts for any proper purpose and apply the same to the purpose designated. In that behalf, the board may act as trustee of any trust created for the benefit of the district and for the benefit of pupils thereof. Therefore, the Director of Business Services recommends the following resolution. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 622 that the school board accept with appreciation the following contributions and permit their use as designated by the donors. To begin with this evening, we have several donations to Meals on Wheels. Colleen Vance donated $500 to Meals on Wheels in memory of Arlene Morgan. And Judy Jesmer also donated $100 to Meals on Wheels in memory of Arlene Morgan. Judy Steinberg donated $100 to Meals on Wheels in memory of Arlene Morgan. And Ralph and Susan Farnsworth also donated $35 to Meals on Wheels in memory of Arlene Morgan. Michael Testa donated $50 to Meals on Wheels. And then following, Dave and Jamie Melismone donated a 2003 Chevrolet Cavalier four-door LS sports sedan to North High School Vocational Auto Class. Michelle Savago donated $300 to the Eagle Point Comet Program. KPMG Gives, in care of the Bergen County's United Way, donated $100 to Richardson Elementary. And Hans Vold donated school supplies to Richardson Elementary. That brings our total fiscal year of 2020-2021 monetary contributions to $17,850.92. Michelle, I would like to make a motion to accept these contributions with appreciation.
All right, thank you, Steve. So moved by Steve, can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Anderson. All in favor say aye, and Josh, please call the roll.
Caleb Anderson.
Aye.
Steve Hunt.
Aye.
Ben Jarman.
Aye.
Nancy Livingston.
Aye.
Julia Martins.
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi.
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, so that motion is approved, and thank you again to all those donors. Next on our agenda is the boundary recommendation. Since we just discussed it, I'm just going to go ahead, Josh. Okay.
That's fine, thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution. So be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 622 that the school boundary changes that will take effect in the fall of 2022 be approved as presented. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jarman,
Second.
second by Livingston. All in favor say aye, and Josh, please call the roll.
Caleb Anderson.
Aye.
Steve Hunt.
Aye.
Ben Jarman.
Aye.
Nancy Livingston.
Aye.
Julia Martins.
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi.
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. So that motion is approved as well. Thank you again, everyone. Next on our agenda, we have human resources recommendations for non-renewal of teachers. And I'm guessing this is Amy Lee, right? So 2.5 hours in, and it's your agenda item.
Yes, that's okay. Good evening, everyone. Chair Yenner, members of the board, Superintendent Osorio. So this evening's resolution is in regards to the recommendation of non-renewal for our probationary teachers. And the probationary period is defined by statute 122A.40 under subdivision 5. All the probationary teachers that is listed has been informed by the principals of their non-renewals. During the probationary period, this is an opportunity for us as a district and the employee to assess the suitability of their role and determine if the employment relationship is meeting their expectations. There are a lot of different reasons that we would look to non-renew a teacher, and that could be based on licensure, budgetary reasons, performance, and based on our contract language, any vacant position that is still open after August 1st, they have to be posted as one-year only positions, and a lot of the individuals listed on tonight's agenda is for one-year only positions. So if by July 1st, we have to provide notice to these employees of their non-renewal and our intent to not move forward with their contract for the 21-22 school year. So tonight is, we're asking for your approval on the recommendations for non-renewal of those teachers.
All right, thank you, Amy Lee. Any questions or comments?
Amy, this is like a pretty typical action that the board does each year. Is that correct?
Correct. So around this time of the year, this is when we are looking to get board approval. And it also allows our teachers the ability to start looking for employment elsewhere, because other districts around us are also going through their staffing season and recognizing what positions or opportunities are also available to them.
If I could add on to our contract, a lot of these teachers will still come back to us next year, but when they were hired, their job was posted as a 1-year only position because of the time of year it was posted. So it doesn't mean that they won't be coming back. It just means they have to be let go and brought back. It's in the contract. And so what happens is when, like Amy Lee said, after a certain date, it can only be posted as a 1-year only position. And that basically allows teachers in the district, if they want to bid into that position, the opportunity to bid in, but they will then create a vacancy that's going to allow us, because we are not laying off teachers because of budgetary cuts for the most part this year. So a lot of them are in 1-year only positions, but when they come back next year, they'll still be in their second year towards tenure. And so they don't start over again. But this is definitely one of those nuances to our contract. So, but just so you know, most of these teachers are not actually going away. They'll still be with us.
That is good to hear, because I know that one of the research has shown that one of the reason for academic achievement gap is that we don't have enough teachers of color in the classroom, and actually the last hired and the first to be let go. And so when you read that, Amy Lee, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking that all the teachers of color that have been hired this year are gonna be let go, and you know, yeah. So that is good to hear, because we need to be able to provide them supports to be able to stay in our district, and so that our students that are walking around in our hallways can see teachers that look like them in the classroom.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to hear you say that. Yeah, unfortunately, because of how our staffing system is set up, it gives a perception that we're losing a lot of these teachers, but it's the actual positions that were posted for 1-year only. And that list has the majority of those individuals are 1-year only positions. So thank you.
That's always been one of my concerns, is this has always been the hardest part of my role as a school board member, is going through this process. But it's important to remember that the teachers that we take action on this evening, it's not a surprise. They knew that these were 1-year assignments, and they know how the system works and what's going to happen. In order for the system change, that requires more work in a different format than what we do as a board at this time of year. But it always bothered me, because I'm a union guy, and I think once you get a job and you've got a contract, you're a good employee, you stay. But it's not a surprise, because it is a condition of employment that these are 1-year agreements. So I've sort of come to peace with it, but I would like to see it changed at some point in the future.
Me too, Steve.
A lot to do too with our bidding process. So the way our contract is written, staff have a right to bid into positions, but when positions get posted really late, internal staff wouldn't have had the chance to be able to bid into those. And so it sometimes means somebody might have a change, but most of the time they don't. And most of the time we keep everybody in, and we definitely fight hard to keep staff of color every single time.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to read the resolution. Is that okay, Amy? Yeah. Okay, be resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 622 that pursuant to statute 122A.40 subdivision 5, that the teaching contracts of the following probationary teachers are hereby terminated at the close of the 2021 school year and non-renewed for the 21-22 school year, effective June 4th, 2021. So I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Hunt. Second by Jarman. All in favor, say aye, and Josh, please call roll.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, so that motion is approved. Thank you again, Amy Lee.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we have the superintendent with adoption of policy 430.
Well, I have to tell you, it is with really great pleasure that I bring forward this is our final reading. We've had 3 readings now of a new racial equity policy. This is a policy, I know our school district, our board set a lot of trends when we, a little over a year and a half ago, adopted a gender inclusion policy. And I couldn't be more proud of our board for being interested in promoting and moving forward with a racial equity policy. This policy has had several readings, the first of which was at our board retreat in February. In March, we had another review of this policy, and tonight is our 3rd and final reading of the policy. I will not read you the whole policy, but I will, for our viewing audience, just recap the things we highlighted last month when we talked about this. I will share my screen for just a moment because I think it's good to kind of take a look. This policy is not an MSBA model policy. This is a policy that we have worked together in collaboration with looking at our equity department under the direction of Sharice Ayers, did a lot of homework, and Emily Lincoln, they did a lot of homework at looking at policies around the country. We wanted to really make sure that the purpose of this policy is stated. Some definitions were included as well. The difference between equality versus equity, racial equity, educational equity, and disparities in culturally responsiveness. We talked about the reason for why we need a policy. It's not about treating everybody the same, but ensuring that everybody benefits from the same, what the level of supports they need so that everybody has access to those same beautiful outcomes post high school. We have a very clear definition here about how we have traditional achievement gaps, racialized achievement gaps, and those are named in here, and that our mission and beliefs really support, if we want to believe this and do this work together, that we are going to name this as a statement that we feel strongly about. A board policy is basically a statement of your belief systems and your guiding principles. The responsibility here is with all the adults in the system. Commitments that we have are many different ways that we're going to make sure that we're committing to the needs of our diverse learners. And then ongoing accountability and reporting. This is going to be, we already have district and program updates, but we added, this came from some feedback at our last reading, that every single department, every single school, every program will annually set very specific equity goals based on data. That progress will be measured and reported by me and the team to the board twice a year. And so I want to give you an example. Whether you're the business office or whether you're human resources or whether you're a elementary school, you will have data that's going to be, you're going to be reporting and working towards your equity goals. The goals are not going to be measured by how much people participate in racial equity trainings, but on actual outcomes for learners. And so these will be part of our regular reporting process with the board. And these are going to be pieces that the board will use as in evaluating my performance. I will use it in evaluating the directors and principals' performances. They will use it in evaluating their teachers' performance, and this will all have an accountability system that's connected together. The other thing that I want to really point out, that we mentioned that our own district strategic plan is connected here. We know that we want to do a refresh of our strategic, oh, that's the MDE strategic plan, my apologies. A refresh of our own district strategic plan. This equity policy, once approved by the board, will be the guiding policy to help us launch that work in refreshing our current strategic plan, because we know that it's time for an updated version of our strategic plan, and we want it completely anchored to equity policy. In the absence of a policy, there can be different interpretations. We want a policy that lasts beyond all of us on this Zoom, a policy that has teeth to it about accountability and beliefs, and can really lay the groundwork for us in all the work that we do. I think some of the situations we've seen in recent weeks and months has been very much grounded in even the preview work we've been doing already with programs and buildings and departments about this equity policy. And so tonight is our last final discussion and hopefully a vote to approve our racial equity policy for the first time ever having one.
All right, thank you, Christine, and I thank you for calling out the updates you made. I think it looks great. I don't know if anyone else, like you said, this is our third reading, so I don't know if anyone else has additional comments or questions.
I'd just like to add an additional comment real quick. From my time on the board, part of my internal guiding lens has been the safety of our children. Safe schools has been very important to me, and to be fiduciary responsible with taxpayer money and to make the wisest investments possible in our school district. And I think we're accomplishing a lot of that. I think we've done some really great work over the years, but in my opinion, and this is just me talking, I think that this document will probably be the most significant legacy that we will leave and that we will learn to lean on and rely on as we move forward with strategic planning and future mission statements and things like that. It means an awful lot, I think, to the students, to today's students. And I think today's students are much different than they were even 2 years ago. They're much more active and much more involved in discussions about matters that I think are important. And this is an opportunity for us to not only be supportive, but to walk the walk and kind of, I'm an old man, put our money where our mouth is. I mean, it just gives us an opportunity to put everything out there where the world can see what we do and what we measure our standards against. And I just personally am really humbled and excited to be able to be part of this decision tonight.
Thank you.
I feel like the policy lines up very well with the school district's mission statement. And our mission statement is we commit each day to develop and empower lifelong learners who thrive in diverse communities. And I just think that lines up very well with what we're trying to do here with the equity policy. And I'm excited to see it implemented. And I also am hoping that we'll be able to implement it well in our community education department. I'm excited to see how that will affect our operations there. But I'm in favor of this motion.
And how wonderful that we have our community education director sticking in with us this evening, Tamara. So you heard, it fell on the right ears.
So I'm I'm in favor of this policy as well. I think that the children that we serve really deserve this kind of policy, and they're gonna be able to grow up as adult, that are responsible citizens and that are well versed in diversity and all that. But my concern is that how are we going to change the behaviors of our staff, and and be able to hold individuals accountable, because we can have policies all we want, but I just want to make sure that we take it a step further and actually hold individuals accountable for adhering to this policy. That's my concern.
One thing I can share is even since the first version was drafted earlier in the winter, we've already been using this policy to hold people accountable, knowing it's coming. And Amy Lee has been a part of many employee situations with me where this has very much guided our moves. And I think there's something to be said for having a board that stands behind this work, because there are plenty of situations that happen all over Minnesota and beyond where something happens and administration takes a certain stance, but they go over administration to the board to have it undone because you don't have a board that's unified in that belief system. And so there's a huge, huge element of accountability that exists knowing you have a board that's adopted this policy. And there's several situations that have happened in the last month. Amy Lee's been with us since February 1st. We have investigated a number of people. I mean, it's what we do, but she can, we can't talk about employee investigations in a board meeting, but what I can tell you is we're very grounded in our beliefs, our equity focus, but even more importantly, we know we have a board that supports us. And I will tell you that is worth all the money in the world, because if you don't have a board that's unified, and you see this in places where you have a board that's very fragmented, and there are interesting challenges to equity that we experience every day in district leadership that we can take on with confidence because of a board that backs us. And I will tell you, everybody I talk to, superintendents everywhere, would tell you that is so critically important if you want to do equity work. There have been superintendents that I know who've been fired for trying to do racial equity work because they didn't have a board that backed them. And I think most of us in this who've been in this business a while have seen that happen to people. We've seen strong equity leaders disappear, they get fired, they get let go. And it's here, there's so many examples. I had 2 principals call me today. Our board will support if a student made a poster that says Black Lives Matter, right? I said, absolutely, our board will support that. Our board and our administration believes that Black lives do matter. I can promise you that would not be allowed everywhere, not even in some of our neighboring districts. I can promise you, because I already have talked to people. But unequivocally, I can respond and say, don't you worry, absolutely, absolutely we can do that. And it's okay for students to express that. This is a safe place to do it, and we value and we want to support our learners. These things, I had 2 different, because of last week when our walkouts happened with the high schools, we actually pulled together meetings with our elementary and our middle schools. All of our elementary principals got together and met with our equity department and leaders and came up with a whole series of activities to do in the elementary schools to very specifically take the conversation about social justice and racism to elementary schools at an age appropriate level. We vetted a whole bunch of different books, and our leaders in our restorative practices group put together some restorative circle conversations to be had. We even sat and talked, how do we make this in a way that, you know, we have children who might have parents who are police officers. We don't want to turn this into, you know, police officers are bad and Black people versus police officers. That is not the conversation we're going to have in our schools, but we are going to have a conversation about how do we make sure everybody feels safe and valued in our community, and understanding and recognizing racism when we see it. And so we put together a whole series of elementary appropriate lessons all the way down to the 4-year-old program, and collected book series. And we literally met for hours and hours with, and then the students at the high school, by the way, when they started talking about their walkout plans, they were so excited. And I called the media and said, please come and see what our kids are doing. And they took it away. And so, you know, it's just, we feel empowered to let our kids lead. And we know that even if there's a complaint that goes to the school board about it, that you will have our backs, and that we can do some of this incredible work of interrupting systemic racism that's important every single day, but it's got to happen. We have incredibly amazing principals. You got to hear from a couple of them today. And they so often will call and say, are you sure the board will be okay if we do this? Yes, the board will be okay if you do this. This board's got your back. You can do this. And this policy matters incredibly for being able to promote that work, interrupt where it's not happening, and hold people accountable where it isn't happening. So there's a whole lot of things that may not come your way at times and may come your way in the future. And it's just a beautiful thing to know we have such a core shared value about this. So I will tell you, and we can talk offline about more examples, but there's so many that happen in a day or in a week you wouldn't even imagine, but this means everything to us.
Is there appetite in other school districts or with MSBA to work with this policy or adapt it or use the policy itself? We're the front runners, but we've got there's a whole state that could use this.
Mm-hmm. And we're not the only front runners. Like, there are some. St. Louis Park has come before us, St. Paul came before us, but there aren't very many. I will say, and Michelle could tell you this because we've had some conversations about MSBA. They're very guided by attorneys, and attorneys want you not to get sued. And so they're very cautious about what kinds of policies they will recommend. And so sometimes we take their advice, and sometimes we go, okay, we're not going to, I will tell you, there was a guidance that came out before all the student walkouts last week, right? And the MSBA guidance, I'm sure some of you got those emails too, was full of attorney speak about, it was with all this guidance, there was sort of like how not to get in trouble. If your students decide to walk out, make sure everybody knows the school does not support it or doesn't come, all these things, guidance things that went out, cautious things to be thinking about. And I sent it to our principals and they said, you're not going to ask us to follow this, are you? And I said, no, I just want you to know what's going on out there, because no, we wanted our students did a beautiful job speaking their voices and share, and they did it all. It was not led by adults. And I think if we took, sometimes we have to weigh the balance we get a little bit, and attorneys will say one thing and we'll say, okay, that's a risk we're willing to take. But to your point, Ben, I think the times are changing. I have hope that things will really start to be changing in the future, but all we can do is pass this and tell everybody about it, and we'll keep working on that.
But I would just want to add something about MSBA, because I did notice at the bottom of this racial equity policy where the cross references are. The cross references are with other schools and with other kind of plans, like from Minnesota Department of Education and so on. But MSBA's position is typically a legal position. So they wait for some legal case and then build a policy around that, like Christine said, to prevent getting yourself in trouble. So I think that's one way that this policy is different from the work that MSBA does.
Another example, MSBA as an organization is not an advocate of the Page Amendment. And, you know, some of us have been involved in that for a long time, you know, and we made a choice amidst all that conversation to name a school Justice Allen Page Elementary. And I will tell you how many superintendents said to me, what? In the middle of all this conversation about a Page Amendment, you're going to name a school? I said, yeah, he's done amazing things for our state and specifically for education, right? But there's so like, but what if you get sued, or what if people don't like that? It's been this bravery that you've shown, and you stood in solidarity when our naming committee brought forth that recommendation. And I know we had that discussion, and you unanimously agreed with that naming committee's recommendation to name the school Justice Allen Page Elementary. Do you know how many people would not be doing that? Only because there's an amendment being discussed and people have differing views on it. But the big people have a response, but well, if this amendment passes, people might be able to sue you if you don't properly educate a child. Well, yeah. And my response has always been, lawsuits change history. And if we're not educating a child, let somebody sue us. They should, because then we should be looking at our practices. So, you know, I think being afraid of mixing up the status quo, I think we've made some decisions together as a team here where we've shown we're not afraid of that. But that has shown our staff, our principals, that they can be brave and bold in their racial equity leadership. Our staff and principals really have gotten that message from our board. You might not feel like you're giving it to them every day, but wow, are they watching? And they talk about it all the time.
All right, I'm going to read the resolution. So be it resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 622 hereby adopts policy 430, racial equity. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Anderson, second by, is it Martins?
Yes.
Was it Martins? You know, everyone's square turns yellow when they speak, but for some reason yours doesn't. Okay, so moved by Anderson, second by Martins. Can I get, or all those in favor say aye, and Josh, can you please call the roll?
Caleb Anderson.
Aye.
Steve Hunt.
Aye.
Ben Jarman.
Aye.
Nancy
Yes.
Livingston.
Aye.
Julia Martins.
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi.
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. So that motion passes as well. Thank you.
I'm so happy and so proud.
Okay, next we have the immersion program resolution. And Christine, I know we just talked about that. Do you want to say anything additional about that?
I think we're good as long as, you know, in order for us to move forward with kind of keeping the plans rolling, I wanted us to, as a board, just to pass a resolution saying we officially agree we're moving forward with this work. And there'll be many updates along the way as we grow and develop this program, but I wanted to at least be able to officially put it on. We've been talking about it and the public's been hearing about it, but we want to get it officially on the record of board action.
All right, then if there are no comments, I will read the resolution. Okay, be it resolved by the School Board of School District 622 that the school board commits to move forward planning for the additions of immersion programs of Spanish, Mandarin, and Hmong at Carver, Castle, and Richardson Elementary Schools, and designates the superintendent of schools to oversee and facilitate the plans. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jarman.
Second.
Second by Martins. All in favor say aye, and Josh, please call the roll.
Caleb Anderson.
Aye.
Steve Hunt.
Aye.
Ben Jarman.
Aye.
Nancy Livingston.
Aye.
Julia Martins.
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, that motion is also approved. Next, we have board communications. And Ben, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I'm part of advisory. It's basically a group of teachers and principals and administrative staff and parents and other community members that get together once a month to talk about things that will eventually come to us. And we provide recommendations for the board. Great group, and it's been going on for a long time. We didn't have a meeting this month because we had a special guest. We read some of her work when we were doing our sessions in November and September, where we did the work study sessions on the policy that we just passed. But Sharice Ayers and Emily Lincoln invited Bettina Love to our, and I'm sorry, that's backwards. We invited her to the district to speak for an hour, and there were tons of teachers on the call, and there was a workshop afterwards. And Bettina spoke, Dr. Love spoke the entire time for an hour, gave us her thoughts just off the cuff on what our educators are doing right now and how we can support our students of color. And one of the big words that she was using this time around was how to be an abolitionist teacher. I think that's a really good way to phrase kind of all the work that she's all about. And I really, one of the things that really struck me about that was how much action she put on the teachers and everybody that was, there were so many calls to action to everybody that was on the call, saying, you know, it's great to be somebody that's an advocate, somebody that's a buddy, somebody that's there for you when we're talking about equity. But when are you going to take action? What's it going to take for you to not be afraid and take that action? And I'll say right then and there, the next day at the job that I hold, I was in the midst of a communication with people that I work with, and some rather hurtful language came out from the people I was working with, and it was something that everyone normally would just pass on because the words that were being used were not being used in were not being used in a nefarious way or anything like that. It's just part of normal business talk, right? And normally people just walk that away and you don't say anything and you just laugh it off. But no, what I heard from Bettina and what I've been hearing from Sharice and Emily and Christine and everyone that I've worked in this district is you don't stand there. You don't just be an ally. You have to be more than an ally. You have to take action and do something and not be afraid to step up and have a conversation with somebody so they can hear what you have to say and change the way that they view things and say things. I've said things that have been culturally insensitive in the past without knowing it at all, and people have called me out on it. And what Bettina said, what Dr. Love said on last Wednesday, or whenever it was, I'm sorry, it was in the last couple of weeks. It's that extra push that I need, that our teachers need to get out there and not just be the allies, but get out there and take action. And I think that's one of those things that, you know, just like Christine was talking about, these are the things that our district is working on to take that step, to make that extra push, to not just be allies, but to get out there and do something when there's racial issues that are happening in our buildings that should not be happening. That's it. Thanks. I really got fired up about that because
We love that about you, Ben.
All right, thanks, Ben. I was there too, and she wants us to be her co-conspirator, I think was the word. Okay, so Caleb, do you want to go next?
I don't have anything tonight. That's it.
All right, thanks. Julia?
I kind of want to echo Ben's excitement. I'm really excited, and Steve's as well, about the equity policy. I think, you know, a lot of people have been asking for change and action, and I really feel this is a great way for our district to, you know, we're showing the community and the families and the students that we are taking these changes forward. In the last couple weeks in my job, I've had some really difficult conversations with parents that have kids of color at varying ages. And so Christine, you shared the stories of kind of taking the equity talk into our lower grades. And I really encourage that we continue to do that, because there's a lot of parents, and not in our district, other districts, that they are struggling. So we definitely are a district that we are really trying to be at the forefront of this movement. And I just would encourage teachers and educators and admin in our districts to just keep having those authentic, meaningful conversations, because they will make a difference in that student's life and in that family's home. I do believe that.
All right, thanks, Julia. Charlotte?
So I'll just continue on with this racial equity discussion. I have been, some of you know that I've been involved in the community conversations about the page amendment, because it does, it is going to help with this racial equity in education that we're talking about. And so I've attended several meetings and listening and just learning and seeing and, you know, finding out how we can help our students in our own district. And yeah, so I've been involved with the page amendment in the community, attending lots and lots of community meetings, especially in the African-American community.
That's great.
All right, thanks, Charlotte. Steve?
One of the things that I've become more aware of in the last couple of months, and especially in the last couple of weeks, is that looking through the world that I see on TV through my daughter's eyes, and having discussions with her have given me a lot of moments of thought and trying to understand the world that she sees. And one of the things that I think of now as a board member, I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to read the board statement at the beginning of the meeting. And I was thinking that, you know, we talk about like Charlotte said before, that her kids that have memories of Skyview and things, and then you know, we're building the museum and all that kind of stuff for people going through this change. Hundreds right now, and eventually thousands of kids are going to move through our classrooms and leave our school district and remember the pieces of the legacy that affected them from the work that we're doing now. I keep using the word humble, but it seems to me that it's such a gift to be able to be part of moments of change that are going to affect so many people. And I look at the school district, I look at the things the emails that my daughter sees and the comments that she has and that she shares with me. We have a lot of deep discussions about some of the issues that are happening now. And not only does it sort of give me an encouragement that, she's 17 and she's paying attention to what's going on in the world. But she at some moment in her life, she's going to look back on these events. And now we have the opportunity to create the lens that these children are going to look back on these events through by the work that we're doing now. And I'm just really pleased to be part of this group and the work that we're doing.
Pretty special kids too. And your daughter emails me too on the weekends. Miss Osorio, we gotta talk. She's such a leader. It's been fun to see her grow up.
All right, thanks, Steve. Nancy?
Yeah, good discussion tonight. Proud to be part of this board. I mean, nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something relative to going forward with equity. And so we're on the right path, and I'm very encouraged. So yeah, and thanks for your leadership, Michelle. I think that retreat that was, you planted the seed for that. You carried through that on that, and that got the ball rolling. And of course, Christine's leadership has been awesome in this regard. Very candid and open, and I appreciate that. So, and Ben, you would have a heart attack listening to the Minnesota Senate on these subjects. I mean, and you can go online and listen, and oh my goodness, it's they're lawmakers, and they have to be civil. And there's a certain decorum that's expected, but oh my goodness, the most outrageous things are said that you just can't believe. But so I have to admire their ability to stay calm and carry on. Anyway, and of course the news, for education coming out of the Senate is not good. And so hopefully the governor and the House can come through with some funding for our schools. Otherwise, we're going to be facing some cuts, some deep cuts. So yeah, so the next couple of weeks, next 2-3 weeks are very important with our government. So stay tuned. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nancy. So the last thing on our agenda is just the reminders of upcoming board meetings. May 4th.
How about you?
Oh, I didn't have anything prepared to share tonight, Charlotte. Yeah. I am going for MSBA. They're having their first meeting in person this weekend. So it'll be the first time that I meet all of those folks in person. It's, socially distanced and masked and everything. And like Christine said, the support for things like the page amendment, we've had conversations like that over Zoom. It's interesting to be with that group because, we're all from the East Metro, but they're all from, all over the state. So maybe a little bit like Nancy's experience, that there's some real different perspectives. So anyway, it'll be interesting to meet all of those folks in person this weekend. I'll give you an update next time. Okay, so our future board meetings are May 4th, 2021. We have a work study session at 4:30 in the boardroom, and May 18th, 2021, we have a business meeting at 6 p.m. in virtual format. If there are no other comments or questions, If not, I'll,
Michelle, did you
ask-
say May
yeah.
4th and May 18th?
yeah,
May 4th and May 18th. Okay. Mhm.
yeah.
Next Tuesday. It's going to come up quick on us this time.
And
Next
anything else?
Tuesday already?
Right? I was looking at going, how do we have a date so close together? I don't know how that happened.
May 4th. Is that right?
That's accurate. It's next week.
That's what my calendar shows too. I looked at it yesterday and went, wow, right away.
Okay. All right. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, I'll make a motion, or I'll look for a motion a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Livingston, second by Anderson. All in favor, say aye. And Josh, please call the roll.
Caleb Anderson,
Aye.
Steve Hunt,
Aye.
Ben Jarman,
Aye.
Nancy Livingston,
Aye.
Julia Martins,
Aye.
Charlotte Natardi,
Aye.
Michelle Yenner.
Aye. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks a lot, you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.